They mocked her for marrying a poor mountain man. He owned half the kingdom. The women of Thornhill Valley laughed behind their hands when Diana Avila announced her engagement to the ragged stranger from the mountains. Poor desperate thing, they whispered, marrying a man who can't even afford proper boots. Her own mother wept with shame. Her father called her a fool. The entire village gathered to watch what they called the beggar's wedding, expecting a spectacle of poverty and regret. But when the royal guards arrived at her cottage door 3 months later, addressing her husband as Your Grace, those same laughing voices fell silent. The poor mountain man they had mocked owned more land than their entire valley, commanded armies, and answered only to the king himself. And Diana, the woman they had pitied and scorned, was about to become the most powerful lady in the Northern Territories. This is the story of how the most despised woman in Thornhill Valley became its salvation, and how those who mocked her learned that true nobility wears no crown. Here's the deal. If you're already rooting for Diana and want to see those villagers get exactly what they deserve, hit that like button right now. And if by the end you're not completely blown away by her transformation, come back and unlike it. But trust me, you won't. What unfolds next is worth every single second. Chapter 1: The Weight of Shame. The August sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked earth of Thornhill Valley as Diana struggled up the hill with 2 wooden buckets cutting into her calloused palms. Water sloshed over the rims with each step, soaking through her worn dress and making the rough fabric cling uncomfortably to her legs. At 28 years old, she should have had a husband to help with such burdens. She should have had children playing in a yard of her own. She should have had a life beyond this endless cycle of fetching, carrying, cooking, and cleaning for a family that saw her as nothing more than free labor. But should have meant nothing in Thornhill Valley, where unmarried women past 25 were considered damaged goods, burdens their families bore, with barely concealed resentment. Look at her, came a voice from the nearby garden where Peggy Wright stood with her arms crossed, watching Dina's struggle with unconcealed disdain. 28. And still fetching water like a servant. My daughter married at 17 to a merchant's son. But then again, my daughter has charm. Peggy's companion, Eula Leonard, laughed sharply. Some women are just meant to serve, I suppose. The Lord gives us each our place. Dina kept her eyes down, pretending not to hear. She had learned long ago that responding only made things worse. The women of Thornhill Valley had elevated cruelty to an art form, and she had been their favorite subject for years. Her arms trembled as she reached the crest of the hill. The buckets seemed to grow heavier with each step, the rope handles digging deeper into her scarred hands. Sweat dripped into her eyes, blurring her vision. She paused under the sparse shade of a dying oak tree, setting the buckets down to catch her breath. Diana, her mother's voice cut through the afternoon heat like a whip crack. Is that you loitering about again? That water won't fetch itself, and your father needs it for the animals. She closed her eyes briefly, gathering what remained of her strength. Her mother, Helen, had perfected the art of making her feel worthless. Every word, every glance carried the same message. You are a disappointment. You are a burden. You are the daughter I never wanted. Coming, mother, she called back, her voice barely above a whisper. And hurry, we don't have all day to wait on your laziness. Dina lifted the buckets again, her shoulders screaming in protest. The Avila cottage sat at the far end of the valley, a small, weather-beaten structure that housed her parents, 2 younger brothers, and herself. She had the smallest corner of the loft, a space so cramped she couldn't fully extend her arms. Her brothers, 16 and 14, had the larger room with actual beds. She slept on a thin pallet stuffed with straw that needed replacing months ago. As she approached the cottage, she could hear her father, Darrell White, arguing with someone inside. His voice carried the perpetual edge of a man disappointed by life and determined to share that disappointment with everyone around him. Waste of food, that's what she is. 28. Do you know what the neighbors say? They laugh at us, Helen. They actually laugh. The Whites couldn't even marry off their daughter, they say. Must be something wrong with her. Dina's steps slowed. She had heard variations of this speech countless times, but it never stopped hurting. What was I supposed to do? Her mother replied, her voice shrill with defensiveness. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But look at her plain as dirt. No dowry, no skills beyond basic housework. What man would want that? Then we should send her to work at the inn. At least then she'd earn her keep instead of consuming ours. The inn? Helen's voice rose an octave. You want people saying our daughter works at the inn? You know what kind of women work there. We'd never live down the shame. Dina stood frozen outside the door, the bucket still in her hands, listening to her parents debate her worth as if she were livestock they couldn't sell. Shame? Shame? Her father's bitter laugh echoed through the thin walls. We're already drowning in shame because of her. At least at the inn she'd be someone else's problem. The bucket slipped from Deanna's numb fingers, hitting the ground with a hollow thud. Water splashed across the dry earth, immediately soaking into the thirsty ground. She stared at the spreading puddle, watching her morning's work disappear into the dust. For a moment, just one dangerous, liberating moment, she considered walking away. Just turning around and walking until Thornhill Valley was nothing but a painful memory. She could find work in another town where no one knew her as that pitiful Avila girl. She could start over, build a life where she wasn't defined by what she lacked. But where would she go? She had no money, no skills that would earn her a living wage, no references that would convince anyone to hire her. Women didn't simply walk away from their families, not without being labeled as loose women or worse. The world outside Thornhill Valley was vast and dangerous, and she had been taught since childhood that a woman alone was a woman doomed. The door burst open. Her mother stood in the doorway, taking in the spilled water and Deanna's defeated posture with eyes that held no sympathy. Clumsy fool, do you think water fetches itself? Get back down to that creek and fill those buckets again, and this time, try not to waste it. Yes, mother. The words came automatically, worn smooth by years of use. As Dina bent to retrieve the buckets, her father appeared behind her mother. Daryl was a hard man, weathered by years of farming rocky soil that yielded barely enough to survive. His face was a map of disappointments, and his oldest daughter represented the greatest of them all. You're lucky we keep you, he said, his voice cold. Another family would have turned you out years ago. Would have let you fend for yourself and see how you like that. Deanna nodded, not trusting her voice. She picked up the buckets and turned back toward the creek, her legs already aching from the previous trip. And Deanna? Her mother called after her. Walk faster this time. We don't have all day to wait on your dawdling. The path back to the creek wound through the center of the village, and Deanna kept her eyes fixed on the ground, trying to make herself invisible. But invisibility was impossible in a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. And her business being unmarried, unwanted, and utterly without prospects was a favorite topic of conversation. There goes the Avila girl, someone whispered as she passed. Such a shame. Pretty enough in the face, but something must be wrong with her temperament. Why else would no man want her? I heard she turned down Jacob Miller's son 3 years ago. Another voice added. Too proud. Thinking she could do better. Well, look where pride got her. Deanna's cheeks burned. She had indeed turned down Jacob Miller's son because he was 15 years old and she had been 25. The boy's father had offered her as if she were a piece of furniture he was trying to unload, making it clear that she should be grateful for any offer at all. She had politely declined, and the village had never let her forget it. The creek ran along the eastern edge of the valley, a narrow ribbon of water that rarely ran dry even in the hottest summers. Dina knelt on the smooth stones at the water's edge and began filling the first bucket, watching the clear water rise slowly to the rim. Careful there, a deep voice said behind her. Creek's running fast today, wouldn't want you to lose your footing. Dina startled, nearly dropping the bucket. She turned to find a man standing a few feet away, leading a sturdy mountain horse by its reins. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin that spoke of a life spent outdoors. His clothes were simple patched trousers, a worn cotton shirt, and boots that had seen better days. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but she could see dark eyes that held none of the mockery or pity she was accustomed to seeing in the eyes of others. Thank you for the warning, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Strange men didn't speak to her. Strange men didn't notice her at all. You're carrying a heavy load, he observed, nodding toward the buckets. Long way back to town with those. I'm used to it, she said quickly, not wanting to appear weak or in need of help. Help always came with a price. I'm sure you are. Something in his tone, not pity, not mockery, just simple acknowledgement, made her look up at him fully for the first time. His face was kind, she decided. Lined and weathered, probably in his mid-30s, with the look of a man who had known hard work and hadn't been broken by it. There was an unexpected gentleness in his eyes, a quality she had rarely seen in the men of Thornhill Valley, where hardship had turned most of them bitter and mean. "I'm Vincent," he said simply, not offering a last name. "Just arrived in the valley, looking for work." "Dina," she replied, then immediately wondered why she had given him her name. Proper women didn't introduce themselves to strange men. But there was something about him that felt safe, unthreatening. "Well, Deanna, would you allow me to carry those buckets for you? My horse could use the walk, and I'd appreciate someone showing me which paths are safe. I'm told mountain strangers aren't always welcome in valley towns." She should refuse. She should thank him politely and send him on his way. If anyone saw her walking with a strange man, the gossip would be unbearable. But her arms ached, her shoulders burned. And the kindness in his eyes was something she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember. "All right," she heard herself say. "But people will talk." Vincent's smile was slight but genuine. People always talk. Might as well give them something worth talking about. He lifted both buckets with an ease that made her weeks of struggle seem almost shameful. They were heavy, she knew exactly how heavy, but he carried them as if they weighed nothing at all. As they walked back toward the village, Deanna found herself stealing glances at this stranger who had appeared from nowhere. Who was he really? What brought him to Thornhill Valley, of all places? And why had he stopped to help someone like her, someone the rest of the world had decided wasn't worth noticing? She didn't know it yet, but those simple questions would soon transform into something far more significant. This chance meeting at the creek would become the first thread in a tapestry that would reshape not only her life but the entire valley's understanding of worth, power, and the dangerous assumptions people make about those they consider beneath them. Behind them, unnoticed, Peggy Wright watched from her garden with narrowed eyes and a calculating expression. By sunset, everyone in Thornhill Valley would know that Deanna Avila had been seen walking with a strange, ragged man from the mountains. And by sunset, Dina's life would never be the same. Chapter 2. The Stranger's Kindness. The walk back through Thornhill Valley felt different with Vincent beside her. Dina had made this journey hundreds of times, always with her head down, always trying to be invisible. But now, with this stranger carrying her buckets and his horse clopping steadily behind them, invisibility was impossible. Eyes followed them from every window. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as they passed. Deanna could feel the weight of every stare, hear the whispers that started the moment they were out of earshot. Who is that man? Is that the Avila girl, walking with a stranger? Look at his clothes, he's clearly got nothing. Another beggar, probably. Vincent seemed entirely unbothered by the attention. He walked with an easy confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin, regardless of what others thought. When they passed Peggy Wright's house, and she made a show of turning her back with an audible sniff of disapproval, Vincent simply nodded politely as if she had greeted them warmly. "Friendly town," he remarked mildly, a hint of amusement in his voice. "They're protective," Dina said carefully, not wanting to speak ill of her neighbors, even though they had never shown her any protection at all. "Is that what we're calling it?" His smile was gentle, taking any sting out of the words. "Seems to me they're more interested in judgment than protection." Deanna felt something unexpected flutter in her chest relief. Perhaps that someone else saw what she had experienced for years. That she wasn't imagining the coldness, the cruelty disguised as concern. "You shouldn't be seen with me," she said quietly as they approached her family's cottage. "People will talk, and it won't be kind talk. You're new here. You don't want to start off on the wrong foot by associating with—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "With who? A hard-working woman who's been carrying water buckets twice a day in the August heat?" Vincent set the buckets down gently by her door. "Seems to me that's exactly the kind of person worth knowing." Before Deanna could respond, the cottage door flew open. Her mother stood in the doorway, her face a storm of emotions. Shock, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. "Dina, what is the meaning of this? Who is this man?" "I helped your daughter with the water, ma'am," Vincent said, removing his hat respectfully. The buckets looked heavy, and I was headed this direction anyway. Helen's eyes raked over Vincent's worn clothes, his patched boots, his simple horse. Dina could see her mother calculating his worth and finding it severely wanting. "We don't need charity from strangers," Helen said coldly. "And my daughter knows better than to walk through town with strange men. What will people think, Mother?" He was only being kind. Kindness? Helen's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Men aren't kind without expecting something in return. Get inside, Deanna. Now." Deanna's cheeks burned with humiliation. She was 28 years old, and her mother still spoke to her as if she were a misbehaving child. She gathered the buckets, unable to meet Vincent's eyes. "Thank you for your help," she mumbled, hurrying toward the door. "It was my pleasure, Deanna," Vincent said, and there was something in the way he said her name with respect, with warmth that made her pause and glance back at him. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, not mockery. Something else entirely. Her mother pulled her inside and slammed the door. Through the thin walls, Deanna could hear Vincent's horse walking away, the steady clip-clop of hooves fading into the distance. "Are you trying to shame us further?" Helen hissed, her face inches from Deanna's. "Walking through town with a beggar? Do you know what Peggy Wright will say? What everyone will say? He was helping me, Mother, that's all." "That's all?" Her father's voice came from the corner where he sat mending a harness. "A strange man doesn't help a woman for no reason, girl. He's either after something, or he's simple in the head. Either way, you stay away from him. But, no buts." Her mother's hand shot out, gripping Deanna's arm hard enough to leave marks. "You've already made yourself unmarriageable. Don't make yourself a scandal as well. At least then we can hold our heads up in church." Deanna pulled her arm free and retreated to her corner of the cottage, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall. Through the small window, she could see the sun beginning its descent toward the western hills. Another day ending exactly like all the others in disappointment, in shame, in the crushing weight of being unwanted. But something had changed. Vincent's kindness, his respectful tone, the way he had looked at her as if she were a person worth noticing, it had awakened something in her she thought had died years ago. Hope. Dangerous, foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in the world saw her as a burden. The next morning, Deanna woke before dawn as always, slipping out of the cottage while her family still slept. The water wouldn't fetch itself, and delaying would only earn her more criticism. She grabbed the buckets and headed down the familiar path, the pre-dawn darkness slowly giving way to the gray light of early morning. She didn't expect to see anyone at this hour. The village was still asleep, smoke just beginning to rise from chimneys as families started their breakfast fires. That's why she nearly dropped the buckets when she rounded the bend and found Vincent sitting on a large rock near the creek, his horse grazing peacefully nearby. "You're up early," he said, rising to his feet when he saw her. Yes. The water." She gestured helplessly at the buckets, her heart beating faster. Had he been waiting for her? "I figured you might come early to avoid the gossip," Vincent said. "Thought you might appreciate some help again. If you'll have it." "You'll only make the gossip worse," Deanna said, but she couldn't keep the hope out of her voice. "People saw us yesterday. Let them see us again then. Maybe they'll get bored if we give them nothing scandalous to talk about." He reached for the buckets. "May I?" Dina handed them over, and together they walked to the creek. As Vincent filled the buckets with practiced efficiency, Dina found herself studying him more carefully in the growing light. His clothes were worn but clean, mended in several places with careful stitches. His hands were calloused from work, but his nails were clean. There was something about him that didn't quite fit the image of a wandering laborer. A certain bearing, a way of speaking that suggested education beyond what most mountain folk received. "Where are you from?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "The mountains mostly," Vincent said, which wasn't really an answer. "I've worked various places over the years. Farms, ranches, wherever I could find honest work. And you came to Thornhill Valley for work?" "Among other things." He straightened, both buckets full. "I heard there might be opportunities here. And I wanted." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I wanted to see the valley for myself." There was something odd about the way he said it, but before Deanna could ask what he meant, voices echoed down the path. A group of women approached, early risers heading to the creek with their own water buckets and wash basins. Dina recognized them immediately. Peggy Wright, in the lead, with Eula Leonard and 2 others behind her. Well, Peggy said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. If it isn't our local charity case and her new friend, starting early today, are we, Dina? Good morning, Mrs. Wright, Deanna said quietly, instinctively stepping back. Is it a good morning? I'm not so sure. Peggy's eyes fixed on Vincent with undisguised disdain. I don't believe we've been introduced to your companion. Though from the look of him, perhaps introductions aren't necessary. We can see well enough what he is. Vincent set down the buckets and faced the women calmly. Vincent Watts, ma'am. Pleased to make your acquaintance. Watts, Peggy repeated, as if tasting the name and finding it wanting. And what brings a Watts to our valley? Surely not honest work that would require skills you clearly don't possess. I possess enough skills to carry water for someone who needs help, Vincent replied evenly. Perhaps you should try it sometime. Builds character. The other women gasped. No one spoke to Peggy Wright that way. She was the wife of the valley's wealthiest farmer, a woman whose opinion could make or break a family's reputation. Her face flushed an ugly red. How dare you? I should have my husband speak to you about your impertinence. Please do. I'd welcome the conversation. Vincent's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath it. In the meantime, if you'll excuse us, Dina needs to get this water back to her family. He picked up the buckets and gestured for Deanna to lead the way. She hurried past the stunned women, her heart pounding. Behind her, she could hear Peggy's furious whispers. Did you see that? The audacity. And Deanna, walking with him bold as brass. Someone needs to put a stop to this before it goes too far. Before she completely ruins what little reputation she has left. Once they were out of earshot, Dina turned to Vincent with wide eyes. You shouldn't have spoken to her like that. She'll make trouble for you now. For both of us. She was already going to make trouble, Vincent said. Women like that don't need a reason. They create their own reasons because their lives are empty and small, and making others feel small is the only way they feel big. Dina had never heard anyone speak such truth so plainly. She had always been taught to accept the cruelty of others, to bow her head, and endure. But Vincent spoke as if he didn't accept the natural order of things, as if he believed things could and should be different. You talk like someone educated, she said carefully as they approached her cottage. Vincent smiled. I've read some books. Taught myself, mostly. Knowledge isn't just for the wealthy, you know. Though they'd like us to believe it is. They reached her door, and Vincent set down the buckets. The sun was fully up now, and soon her family would be stirring. Already, Deanna could hear movement inside her brothers arguing, her mother's sharp voice telling them to hurry. Will you be here tomorrow? The question escaped before she could stop it. Do you want me to be? Dina knew what she should say. She should tell him no, that it was inappropriate, that she couldn't risk more gossip. But when she looked into his kind eyes, saw the genuine respect in his expression, the word that came out was different. Yes. Vincent's smile was like sunrise. Then I'll be here. He tipped his hat and led his horse away, leaving Deanna standing by her door with a feeling she couldn't quite name warming her chest. It felt dangerous. It felt foolish. It felt like the first spark of something that could either save her or destroy whatever remained of her dignity. Inside the cottage, her mother was already calling for her, the familiar litany of complaints beginning. But for the first time in years, Dina didn't feel the usual crushing weight of despair. Something had shifted. Something had changed. And high on the ridge above the valley, in a place where Deanna couldn't see, a man in fine traveling clothes lowered a spyglass and smiled. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Chapter 3. The Gossip Storm. For the next 2 weeks, Vincent appeared at the creek every morning just as dawn broke. Sometimes he was already there when Deanna arrived, sitting patiently on the flat rock that had become their unofficial meeting place. Other times, he would arrive moments after her, leading his horse and greeting her with a simple nod and a warm smile that made her heart do strange things in her chest. They fell into an easy routine. Vincent would fill the buckets while Denna kept watch for other early risers. Then they would walk back through the slowly waking village, talking about small things, the weather, the crops, the way the morning light turned the mountains gold. Vincent never asked intrusive questions about her family, or why she remained unmarried. He simply treated her as if she were someone worth knowing, worth listening to, worth respecting. It was the most dangerous thing that had ever happened to her, because with each passing day, the gossip grew louder and more vicious. What had started as idle speculation had transformed into a full-blown scandal that consumed every conversation in Thornhill Valley. "I saw them again this morning," Eula Leonard announced at the general store, her voice pitched loud enough for everyone to hear. "Walking together, close as you please. That strange mountain man and the Avila girl. It's been going on for weeks now. Every single morning," confirmed another woman, examining fabric she had no intention of buying. "My husband saw them by the creek at dawn." "What kind of decent woman meets a man alone before sunrise?" "We all know what kind," Peggy Wright said, with a knowing look. "The desperate kind. The kind who knows no respectable man will have her, so she settles for whatever vagrant shows her attention." The store owner, an elderly man named Thomas, shook his head sadly. "Poor Daryl and Helen. First, they can't marry off their daughter. Now she's bringing shame on the family name by carrying on with a beggar." "Has anyone actually spoken to this man?" asked a younger woman, new to the valley. "Perhaps he has honest intentions." The others turned to stare at her, as if she had suggested the sun might rise in the west. "Honest intentions?" Peggy's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "Look at him. Those clothes are held together with thread and hope. His boots are falling apart. He lives in that abandoned shepherd's shelter up the mountain, because he can't afford proper lodging. What could he possibly offer except more poverty and shame?" "He works," the young woman said hesitantly. "I've seen him helping at the Miller farm." "Yes, day labor for pennies," Eula interjected. "The kind of work even the laziest farmhand won't do. He's nobody. Nothing. And Deanna's throwing away what little reputation she has left for a man who can't even provide her with a roof over her head." What none of them knew, what they couldn't see because they never looked past the surface, was that Vincent had been offered better positions. The Miller farm had asked him to stay on permanently as a foreman. The blacksmith wanted him as an apprentice, after seeing how quickly he learned the craft. Even the valley's largest landowner had approached him about managing his livestock. Vincent had politely declined them all, saying he wasn't ready to settle yet, but the truth was more complicated than that. In the cottage, Dina's life had become unbearable. Her mother's anger had evolved from sharp words into cold, punishing silence. Helen would go entire days without speaking to her daughter, communicating only through pointed looks and heavy sighs. When she did speak, it was to remind Deanna of her worthlessness. "I saw you again this morning," Helen said one evening as Deanna prepared dinner. "With that man. Everyone saw you. He helps me with the water, Mother. That's all." "That's all?" Helen's voice rose dangerously. "That's all? Do you know what they're saying about you? Do you know what Peggy Wright told me at church?" She said. Helen's voice broke, and for a moment, Deanna saw genuine pain in her mother's eyes. "She said I had raised a loose woman. That I had failed as a mother. That the Avila name was ruined." "I haven't done anything wrong," Deanna protested. "We only talk. He's been nothing but respectful." "Respect?" Her father's fist slammed on the table, making the dishes jump. "You think anyone cares about respect? You think anyone believes that a man helps a woman every morning out of the goodness of his heart? People aren't that foolish, Deanna. Maybe they should be less concerned with my business, and more with their own." The words were out before she could stop them. Deanna had never spoken back to her father before. Never raised her voice, never challenged his authority. The silence that followed was deafening. Daryl rose slowly from his chair, his face darkening. "What did you say to me?" "I said," Deanna's courage wavered, but she forced herself to continue. "I said maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is everyone else who has nothing better to do than invent stories about people they don't even know." "You defend him?" Her mother's voice was shrill with disbelief. "This vagrant who's destroying your reputation? Who's making us the laughingstock of the entire valley? He's been kinder to me in 2 weeks than this family has been in 28 years. The slap came so fast Deanna didn't see it coming. Her mother's palm connected with her cheek, the sound echoing in the small space. Deanna's hand flew to her face, eyes stinging with tears. How dare you, Helen whispered, her voice shaking. After everything we've done for you, kept you clothed, kept you fed, kept a roof over your ungrateful head. And this is how you repay us? By throwing yourself at the first man desperate enough to give you attention? Helen, Darryl said, his voice suddenly tired. That's enough. But it wasn't enough. The dam had broken, and years of resentment came flooding out. No, it's not enough. Helen turned on her husband. She needs to hear this. She needs to understand what she's doing to this family. Every time she's seen with that man, we lose more respect. Today, Margaret Wilson crossed the street to avoid speaking to me. Me? As if I were some common. I'll stop seeing him, Dina heard herself say. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. But she couldn't bear her mother's pain anymore. Couldn't bear being the source of so much shame. I'll tell him not to come anymore. Helen stared at her daughter, searching for signs of deception. You mean that? Yes. The lie came easier than the truth. I'll tell him tomorrow. But when tomorrow came, when Vincent met her at the creek with his usual warm smile, Deanna found she couldn't say the words. Couldn't tell him to leave, to stop helping her, to stop being the one bright spot in her colorless existence. You're quiet this morning, Vincent observed as they walked. Something troubling you? My family, she admitted. The gossip. It's getting worse. They want me to stop seeing you. Vincent was silent for a long moment. And what do you want? No one had ever asked her that before. What she wanted had never mattered, not to her family, not to the village, not to anyone. She was supposed to want what others thought was appropriate, to desire only what wouldn't cause trouble or draw attention. I don't know, she whispered. That's not true. Vincent stopped walking, setting down the buckets. They were on the outskirts of the village, hidden from view by a stand of trees. I think you know exactly what you want. The question is whether you're brave enough to claim it. I'm not brave, Dana said. I've never been brave. You carry water buckets twice a day in the summer heat. You endure the cruelty of people who should know better. You get up every morning despite knowing the day will bring nothing but hardship and criticism. Vincent's eyes were intense, focused entirely on her. That's not bravery. That's not strength. That's just surviving. Surviving is the bravest thing a person can do. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched the fading bruise on her cheek, the mark her mother's slap had left. Who did this? Deanna flinched away. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. 3 words. Simple words, but they carried a weight that made Deanna's eyes fill with tears. When had anyone ever cared what happened to her? When had anyone ever looked at her bruises and felt anger on her behalf? Dina, Vincent said softly, I need to tell you something. I need to be honest with you about who I am and why I'm really here. Her heart clenched. Here it was the moment when he would reveal his true intentions. Maybe the gossips were right. Maybe he did want something from her. And now that he had won her trust, he would name his price. I'm not who you think I am, he continued. And Deanna braced herself for disappointment. I didn't come to Thornhill Valley by accident. I came looking for something specific. And then I met you. And everything became more complicated. What were you looking for? Dina asked, her voice barely audible. Before Vincent could answer, voices echoed up the path. A group of men approached farmers heading to their fields, their conversation dying as they spotted Dina and Vincent standing close together, alone among the trees. Well, well, one of them called out. If it isn't the mountain man and his lady. Starting early today. Are we? Or maybe you never stopped from yesterday, another added with a crude laugh. That would explain why she's so eager to meet you before sunrise. Deanna's face burned. She stepped away from Vincent, creating distance between them, but the damage was done. This encounter would be all over the valley by noon, twisted into something ugly and scandalous. Gentlemen, Vincent said calmly. You're jumping to conclusions. Are we? Looks pretty clear from where we're standing. A man and woman, alone in the trees, having secret conversations. What conclusions should we draw? The right ones, Vincent replied. Which would be that I'm helping a neighbor with her water and having a friendly conversation. Nothing more, nothing less. Friendly conversation, one of the men repeated mockingly. Is that what young people call it these days? Leave her alone, Vincent said, and his voice had changed. It was still calm, but there was an edge to it now, a quality of command that made the men pause. Your problem is with me, not with her. So if you have something to say it to me directly. The men exchanged glances, suddenly uncertain. There was something about Vincent's stance, the way he held himself, that suggested crossing him might not be wise. No problem, the first man said, backing down. Just making observations. No harm in that. There's plenty of harm in it, Vincent countered. Harm to a woman's reputation, harm to her standing in the community, harm that could follow her for years. So perhaps you gentlemen should keep your observations to yourselves. The men muttered among themselves and moved on, but not before throwing back looks that promised this story would spread like wildfire. Deanna watched them go, feeling the last remnants of her reputation crumbling to dust. I should go, she said, reaching for the buckets. This was a mistake. All of it was a mistake. Dina, wait. No. She picked up the buckets, ignoring how they cut into her palms. They're right. Everyone's right. This is wrong. And I was foolish to think otherwise. Please don't come tomorrow. Please don't come anymore. She hurried away before Vincent could respond, before the tears threatening to spill could fall, before she could see the expression on his face. But she couldn't escape the sound of his voice calling after her. Deanna, I came here because of you, because I needed to find you. She didn't stop, didn't turn around, didn't let herself wonder what those words meant. She just ran, water sloshing from the buckets, her heart breaking with every step. Behind her, Vincent stood in the empty path, watching her disappear. Then he turned and walked not toward his shelter on the mountain, but toward the largest house in the valley, the home of Isaiah Carver, the region's most powerful landowner and magistrate. It was time to stop hiding, time to set things in motion. Time for Thornhill Valley to learn that the poor mountain man they had all dismissed was not what he appeared to be, and that the woman they had scorned was about to become untouchable. Chapter 4. The Proposal. Deanna didn't leave the cottage for 3 days. She claimed illness, a headache, a fever, anything to avoid facing the village and the whispers that now followed her everywhere. Her mother, surprisingly, didn't force her out. Perhaps Helen was relieved to have her daughter hidden away, out of sight, and therefore temporarily out of mind. But the walls of the cottage felt like they were closing in. Deanna lay on her thin pallet in the loft, staring at the rough wooden beams above her head, replaying Vincent's final words over and over. I came here because of you, because I needed to find you. What did that mean? How could he have come looking for her when they had never met before? It made no sense. Unless he had heard about her, somehow heard that she was unmarried, desperate, easy prey for whatever scheme he was running. The thought made her stomach turn. Had she been that foolish? Had she let loneliness and a few kind words blind her to his true intentions? On the 4th morning, her mother shook her awake before dawn. Get up, Helen said, her voice strangely neutral. You have a visitor. What? Dina sat up, confused. Who would visit me? Just get up and make yourself presentable. Wear your Sunday dress. Her mother's face was unreadable, not angry, not pleased, just carefully blank. Deanna's hands trembled as she changed into the dress, her only decent garment, worn thin from years of use but still relatively clean. She splashed water on her face, pinched her cheeks to bring color to them, and braided her hair with fingers that wouldn't quite cooperate. When she climbed down from the loft, she found her father sitting at the table with his hands folded, wearing the same carefully neutral expression as her mother. Both of them were dressed in their church clothes, which made no sense on a Thursday morning. Who's here? Deanna asked, her heart beginning to race. You'll see, her father said. Go outside. He's waiting for you. Deanna's breath caught. Vincent? Had he come despite her telling him to stay away? But why would her parents be dressed up for Vincent? They despised him. She stepped outside, and the morning sun momentarily blinded her. When her vision cleared, she saw a figure standing by the fence, but it wasn't Vincent. At least, it didn't look like Vincent. The man waiting for her was dressed in fine traveling clothes, a tailored coat of deep blue wool, clean trousers, polished boots that gleamed in the sunlight. His hair was neatly trimmed, his beard shaped and groomed. But the eyes were the same, kind, warm. watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Dina," Vincent said, and his voice was the same too. "Thank you for seeing me. I don't understand." She looked down at her own shabby dress, suddenly painfully aware of the contrast between them. "What are you wearing? Where did you get those clothes?" "They're mine," he said simply. "I just haven't been wearing them until now." "But why? Why would you pretend to be poor if you're not?" Vincent glanced at her parents, who were openly watching from the window. "Perhaps we could walk? I have something important to ask you, and I'd prefer to do it without an audience." Deanna looked back at the cottage. Her mother made a shooing motion with her hand, actually encouraging her to go with him. What was happening? They walked in silence toward the edge of the property, where a line of trees provided some privacy. Deanna's mind raced with questions, but she couldn't seem to form words. Nothing made sense. Vincent had been living in a shepherd's shelter, doing day labor for pennies. Now he looked like a gentleman. How? "I owe you an explanation." Vincent began when they were out of earshot. "Several explanations, actually. And an apology." "I don't understand any of this," Deanna said, her voice shaking. "Who are you really?" "My name is Vincent Watts." That part was true. "But I'm not a wandering laborer. I'm the Duke of Northridge. And I own half the territory from here to the capital, including most of the land your valley sits on." The words hit her like a physical blow. Deanna actually staggered, reaching out to steady herself against a tree. That's impossible. I know how it sounds." Vincent ran a hand through his newly trimmed hair. "Let me explain. 2 months ago, I learned that my younger brother, my only living family, had died. He had been living in this valley under an assumed name, trying to escape some trouble he'd gotten into at court. When I came to settle his affairs, I kept hearing stories about you." "About me?" Deanna's voice was barely a whisper. "My brother mentioned you in his letters. He wrote about the woman everyone mocked, the one they treated as less than human. He wrote that you were kind to him even when you had no reason to be, that you shared your lunch with him once when he had nothing, that you were the only person in this valley with any real decency." Deanna's mind flashed back to several months ago, a young man, sick and struggling, who had appeared at the creek one day. She had shared her bread with him, talked with him for a few minutes. She hadn't thought anything of it. "I don't remember," she said weakly. "You wouldn't. It was a small kindness to you. But to him, in his final days, it meant everything." Vincent's voice was thick with emotion. "He died a week after that encounter. Fever took him. In his last letter to me, he asked me to do something for him. He asked me to find you and make sure you were all right," he said. Vincent paused, seeming to gather himself. "He said the world needed more people like you, and fewer people like those who had made his life miserable." Tears streamed down Deanna's face. She didn't remember the young man's name, didn't remember exactly what they had talked about, but she remembered his eyes, grateful, lonely, desperate for a kind word. "So I came here," Vincent continued. "I came to see what kind of person would show kindness to a dying stranger. And I found exactly what my brother described. A woman of extraordinary character, crushed under the weight of a cruel world. I wanted to know you, to understand what made you different. So I disguised myself as a laborer and waited for you at the creek." "You lied to me," Deanna said, but there was no anger in it, just confusion and hurt. "I did," Vincent admitted, "and I'm sorry for that. But Deanna, if I had come to you as a duke, you would have treated me differently. Everyone treats me differently. They see the title, the wealth, the power. They don't see me. But you saw me, the real me, even when you thought I was nothing." "I never thought you were nothing," Deanna protested. "I know. That's why I'm here now, dressed like this, about to ask you something that will probably shock you as much as my identity did." Deanna's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst. "What are you going to ask me?" Vincent took both of her hands in his. His palms were warm, steady, while hers trembled like leaves in a storm. "Deanna Avila, will you marry me?" The world tilted. Deanna actually felt dizzy, as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted. "What?" "I'm asking you to marry me, to be my wife, to leave this place and this life of cruelty, and come with me to Northridge, where you'll be treated with the dignity and respect you deserve." But you don't even know me, Deanna said, pulling her hands away. We've spent a few weeks walking and talking. That's not enough to build a marriage on, isn't it? Vincent asked gently. I know that you're strong, even when the world tries to break you. I know you're kind, even when no one shows you kindness in return. I know you carry water buckets twice a day without complaint, that you defend even those who hurt you, that you have more integrity in your smallest finger than most people have in their entire bodies. What else do I need to know? That I'm nothing. The words burst out of Deanna like a dam breaking. I'm nobody. I can't read well. I don't know how to act in high society. I don't know anything about being a duchess. Everyone in this valley is right about me. I'm worthless. Vincent's face hardened. Don't you ever say that again. Those people, he gestured toward the village, have spent years trying to convince you that you're worthless, because it makes them feel better about their own empty lives. But you're not worthless, Deanna. You're extraordinary. And I'm not asking you to become someone else. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, just in a place where that person is valued. Why? Deanna whispered. Why me? You could have anyone. Any woman in the kingdom would marry you. I don't want any woman in the kingdom. I want you. Vincent's voice was firm, certain. I want someone who understands what it means to be dismissed and overlooked. Someone who has compassion because she's needed it herself. Someone who will use power wisely because she knows what it's like to be powerless. I want a partner, Dina. Not an ornament. Not someone who wants my title. I want you. Dina looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. No mockery, no hidden agenda, no cruelty waiting to spring. Just honest affection and a hope that mirrored her own. I need time, she said. It's too much. I can't think. Take all the time you need, Vincent said. But know this, I've already spoken to your parents. They've given their permission. And I've purchased this cottage and the land around it from the valley owner. Regardless of your answer, it's yours, free and clear. You'll never have to worry about being turned out or losing your home. You what? Your parents will have security for their old age. Your brothers will have land to farm when they come of age. And you, Vincent smiled slightly, you will have choices. Whether you marry me or not, you'll never again be at the mercy of people who don't value you. Deanna couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was saying. A duke was standing in front of her, asking her to marry him. He had secured her family's future out of kindness. He had seen past her poverty and shame to something worth treasuring. It was impossible. It was absurd. It was everything she had never dared to dream. I know I'm asking a lot, Vincent said. I'm asking you to leave everything you know, to step into a world that will seem strange and frightening. But I promise you this, I will never let anyone treat you the way this valley has treated you. I will stand beside you, defend you, support you. You will never be alone again. Tears were flowing freely down Deanna's cheeks now. Can I give you my answer tomorrow? I need to think. Of course. Vincent bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that seemed natural to him now that she could see him clearly. I'll be staying at Isaiah Carver's house. When you're ready, send word. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at her. Dina? Whatever you decide, know that meeting you has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. You are worthy of love, of respect, of every good thing this world has to offer. Don't let anyone ever convince you otherwise. Then he was gone, walking back toward the village with the bearing of the nobleman he truly was. And Deanna was left standing among the trees, her entire world shattered and rebuilt in the space of a single conversation. Inside the cottage, her parents waited with barely contained excitement. Her father was practically vibrating with joy. Did he ask you? Daryl demanded the moment she walked in. What did you say? I said I needed time to think. Time to think. Her mother's voice rose to a shriek. Time to think. A duke asks you to marry him and you need time to think. Are you insane? Helen's right for once, her father said. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. More than a lifetime. Do you know what this means for our family? For your brothers? The Duke of Northridge wants to marry you. I know what it means, Dina said quietly. But I need to be sure. I need to know I'm making this choice for the right reasons. The right reasons? Her mother laughed. high and slightly hysterical. The right reason is that you'll never get another offer like this. You'll be a duchess, Deanna. You'll have money, position, respect. Everything you've never had. And everything you've always wanted for me, Deanna said, suddenly seeing her mother clearly for the first time. This isn't about my happiness, it's about yours. It's about your standing in the village, your bragging rights, your security. How dare you? Helen's hand rose as if to slap her again, but Darryl caught her wrist. Don't, he said firmly. Don't give her any reason to refuse. If she walks away from this with a fresh bruise on her face, that Duke will know who put it there. And then where will we be? It was the most honest thing her father had ever said. They needed her to accept Vincent's proposal. Their future comfort depended on it. For once, she had something they desperately wanted, and they were powerless to force her hand. The realization was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. I'll give him my answer tomorrow, Deanna said. And whatever I decide, you'll accept it. Because it's my choice, not yours, mine. She walked to her corner of the cottage, climbed the ladder to her loft, and lay down on her thin pallet. Below her, she could hear her parents arguing in frantic whispers, but she blocked them out. A duke wanted to marry her. A duke who had seen her at her lowest and still found her worthy. A duke who promised respect, partnership, and a life beyond the cruelty of Thornhill Valley. But was it real? Could it be real? Or would she wake up tomorrow and find it had all been a dream, a beautiful, impossible dream that would hurt even more than the reality she'd always known? Outside her window, the sun climbed higher in the sky. And in the village, the gossip was about to reach a fever pitch that would make everything that came before seem like whispers. Because word was spreading like wildfire. The poor mountain man was actually the Duke of Northridge. And he had just proposed marriage to the most despised woman in Thornhill Valley. Chapter 5. The Wedding of Whispers. Deanna didn't sleep that night. She lay on her pallet, watching moonlight creep across the wooden beams above her head, wrestling with a decision that would define the rest of her life. If she said no, she would remain here safe in the familiar cruelty of Thornhill Valley, but at least knowing what to expect. Her parents would never forgive her for refusing such an opportunity, but she would survive as she always had. If she said yes, she would step into a world completely unknown to her. She would become a duchess, a title that felt as foreign as a language she'd never learned. She would face nobles who would look at her background with the same contempt the valley women had always shown her, except these nobles would have far more power to make her life miserable. But she would also have Vincent. That was the thought that kept circling back. No matter how many times she tried to think practically about titles and security and social position, Vincent had seen her. Really seen her. Not as a burden, or a scandal, or a problem to be solved, but as a person worth knowing, worth valuing, worth loving, perhaps, though that word felt too large and fragile to examine closely. As dawn broke, Deanna made her decision. She climbed down from the loft to find her mother already awake, sitting at the table with her hands folded, waiting. Helen looked like she hadn't slept either. Well? Her mother asked, her voice tight with tension. I'm going to say yes, Deanna said quietly. The sound her mother made was somewhere between a sob and a laugh. Thank God. Thank God. Helen actually crossed herself. Something Deanna had rarely seen her do outside of church. When will you tell him? This morning. I'll walk to the Carver house now. Not dressed like that, you won't. Her mother stood abruptly. You're going to see a duke. You need to look presentable. For the next hour, Helen fussed over Dana with an attention she'd never shown before. She pressed the Sunday dress more carefully, braided Deanna's hair with gentle fingers, even produced a small bottle of rose water that she dabbed on Deanna's wrists and neck. There, Helen said, stepping back to examine her work. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, Deanna saw something that might have been genuine affection in her mother's eyes. You look like a lady. Mother, Deanna said hesitantly. Did you ever actually care about me? Or was I always just a disappointment? Helen's face closed off immediately, the brief softness vanishing. What kind of question is that? An honest one. Her mother was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was tired. I wanted better for you. That's all I ever wanted. And when it became clear you wouldn't get better, that you'd be stuck here, Unmarried and dependent, it was hard to watch. Hard to accept. Maybe I was cruel sometimes. But it was only because I saw no way out for you. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was closer than Dina had ever received. She nodded, understanding that this was as much as her mother could give. I should go, Dina said. Yes. And Dina? Her mother caught her hand briefly. Don't waste this chance. Whatever you do, don't let pride or fear ruin this opportunity. The walk to the Carver house felt surreal. Deanna moved through the village in the early morning light, and everywhere she looked people were staring. Word had spread. Everyone knew that the poor mountain man was actually a duke, and everyone had theories about what would happen next. She'll refuse him, Peggy Wright was saying loudly to a cluster of women outside the general store. She's too proud, that one. Always has been. She'll convince herself she's too good for him, mark my words. Or she'll accept and make a fool of herself, Eula added. Can you imagine her at a ducal court? She can barely read. She'll embarrass herself and him within a week. Dina forced herself to keep walking, head high. Let them talk. Soon, she would be beyond their reach, beyond their capacity to hurt her. The Carver house was the largest in the valley, a 2-story structure with glass windows and a covered porch. Deanna had never been inside. People like her weren't invited into houses like this. She knocked on the door, her heart hammering. A servant answered, a real servant, likely brought by Vincent from Northridge. The woman looked Deanna up and down with professional neutrality. I'm here to see the Duke, Deanna said, her voice steadier than she felt. Your name, miss? Deanna Avila. The servant's expression changed immediately, warming into something approaching respect. Of course, Miss Avila. His Grace has been expecting you. Please come in. The interior of the house was overwhelming, polished wood floors, fine furniture, paintings on the walls. Dina followed the servant through rooms that seemed designed to make her feel small and out of place. Vincent was in the study, standing by the window overlooking the valley. He turned when she entered, and his face lit up with hope so naked it made her chest ache. Dina, he said. Thank you for coming. The servant withdrew, closing the door behind her. They were alone. I have my answer, Deanna said, deciding that directness was better than dragging this out. If you still want me, I'll marry you. The relief that washed over Vincent's face was profound. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and took her hands in his. Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm sure, Dina interrupted. I'm terrified, and I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm sure. You're the kindest person I've ever met. And I think I could be happy with you. I'll spend every day trying to make sure you are, Vincent promised. Now we should discuss arrangements. I was thinking a small ceremony here in the valley, and then we'll travel to Northridge, unless you'd prefer something different. Small is good, Deanna said quickly. The thought of a large wedding, with hundreds of eyes judging her every move, was terrifying. Just family and, well, whoever needs to be there officially. Then small it will be. I've already spoken to the circuit preacher. He can perform the ceremony in 3 days. If that's acceptable to you. 3 days. In 3 days, she would be married. In 3 days, her entire life would change. That's acceptable, Deanna said. And Vincent smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his whole face. There's something else, he said, reaching into his coat pocket. I had this made for you. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a ring not ostentatious or overwhelming, but beautiful in its simplicity. A gold band with a single sapphire that caught the morning light. It's the color of your eyes, Vincent said softly, taking the ring and sliding it onto her finger. I wanted you to have something that was yours. Not borrowed, not inherited. Yours. Deanna stared at the ring, feeling tears threaten again. She had never owned anything of value. Never had anything that wasn't worn out, handed down, or broken. It's beautiful, she whispered. You're beautiful, Vincent replied. And I know you don't believe that. I know this valley has spent years convincing you otherwise. But I see you, Deanna. And what I see is extraordinary. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. The servant entered with an apologetic expression. Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but there's a crowd gathering outside. Word has spread about the engagement, and people are curious. Vincent's jaw tightened. Let them be curious. Miss Avila is not a spectacle for their entertainment. Of course, Your Grace. I only thought you should know. After the servant left, Vincent turned to Diana. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this. The Valley's sudden interest in your well-being is both predictable and infuriating. Let me see them, Diana said, surprising herself. Let me show them I'm not ashamed. Are you certain? She nodded. For years, she had hidden, had kept her head down, had tried to be invisible, but she wasn't invisible anymore. She was engaged to a duke, and while that terrified her, it also gave her a power she'd never possessed, the power to face her tormentors as an equal. They walked to the front door together. Vincent opened it, and Dina stepped onto the porch with her hand in his. The crowd outside was substantial. It seemed half the valley had gathered. At the front, predictably, stood Peggy Wright and Eula Leonard, their faces twisted with complicated emotions. Is it true? Someone called out. Are you really marrying him? Yes, Deanna said, her voice carrying clearly. We're to be married in 3 days. The murmuring grew louder. Deanna could see the calculations happening behind people's eyes, the reassessment of her worth, the sudden realization that they had spent years mocking someone who was about to become one of the most powerful women in the territory. Well, Peggy said, her voice loud and falsely cheerful. What wonderful news. We're all so happy for you, dear. Aren't we, everyone? The crowd made various noises of agreement, but Deanna could see the envy and resentment simmering beneath the surface. Thank you, Deanna said simply. She wouldn't give them anything else, no explanations, no justifications, no reassurances that she was still the same pitiful creature they could dismiss. Will there be a celebration? Eula asked, her tone overly sweet. Surely the whole valley should celebrate such a fortunate match. The ceremony will be private, Vincent said firmly. Immediate family only. Oh, Eula's face fell. Of course, very private. How exclusive. Deanna almost smiled. After years of exclusion, it was deeply satisfying to be the one doing the excluding. If you'll excuse us, Vincent said. We have arrangements to finalize. Good day. He guided Deanna back inside and closed the door firmly. Through the window, they watched the crowd disperse, people breaking into clusters to dissect every word, every gesture, every implication. That was well done, Vincent said. You held your head high. I was terrified, Deanna admitted. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. Vincent squeezed her hand gently. Now shall we discuss the details? I want everything to be exactly as you wish. Over the next hour they planned a simple ceremony at the small church on the hill. Her immediate family would attend, along with Isaiah Carver as witness, and a few of Vincent's men who had accompanied him from Northridge. The valley preacher would officiate. Afterward, they would leave immediately for Northridge, traveling by private carriage. I don't have a wedding dress, Deanna said, the practical reality suddenly hitting her. I only have the one good dress. And it's not really. I've taken the liberty of ordering one. Vincent interrupted. It should arrive tomorrow. I hope you don't mind. I wanted you to have something beautiful, something worthy of you. You keep saying that, Deanna said softly. That I'm worthy. That I'm extraordinary. But I'm not, Vincent. I'm just a woman who's been unlucky in life. That doesn't make me special. Vincent took both her hands and looked directly into her eyes. Deanna, listen to me. I've spent my entire life at court, surrounded by nobles and ladies and people who have every advantage. And I have never not once met anyone with your strength of character. You've been beaten down by life again and again, and you haven't become bitter or cruel. You've remained kind. That's not luck. That's choice. That's who you are at your core. And that is what makes you extraordinary. Deanna didn't know what to say. For so long, she had defined herself by her failures, her unmarried status, her poverty, her lack of education. She had never considered that her responses to those hardships might be worth something. I'll try to live up to that, she said finally. You already do, Vincent assured her. Now, I should let you go. You have a wedding to prepare for, and I imagine your family will want to discuss plans. He walked her to the door, and before she left, He lifted her hand and kissed it gently, a gesture so courtly and respectful it made her blush. 3 days, he said, and then you'll never have to carry water buckets again. Dina smiled. What if I want to? Then I'll carry them for you, Vincent replied. That's what partners do. The next 3 days passed in a blur. The wedding dress arrived, a creation of ivory silk, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It was the most beautiful thing Dina had ever seen, let alone worn. Women from the valley appeared at her door with sudden offers of help, their previous cruelty forgotten in their eagerness to associate themselves with her good fortune. Dina accepted their help with polite grace, but she didn't forget. She would never forget. On the morning of the wedding, her mother helped her dress with trembling hands. For the first time in Dina's memory, Helen was crying not from anger or frustration, but from what might actually be emotion. You look like a princess, Helen whispered, adjusting the veil. I never imagined. I never thought you'd have this. Neither did I, Dina admitted. The ceremony was exactly as planned, small, simple, meaningful. Dina walked down the church aisle on her father's arm, and for once Darryl looked at her with something approaching pride. Vincent waited at the altar, dressed in the formal attire of his rank, and when he saw her, his eyes shone with genuine happiness. The preacher spoke the traditional words. Vows were exchanged, rings were placed, and when Vincent kissed her, chaste and respectful, but full of promise, Dina felt something in her chest. That might have been hope. Ladies and gentlemen, the preacher announced, I present to you the Duke and Duchess of Northridge. Duchess. The word rang in Dina's ears like a bell. She was a duchess now. The most despised woman in Thornhill Valley had just become royalty. Outside the church, a carriage waited, gilded and magnificent, pulled by 4 matched horses. Vincent helped her inside, and as they pulled away from the church, Dina looked back one last time at the valley that had shaped her. People lined the street, watching her leave. Some faces showed genuine happiness, others showed barely concealed envy, and a few, like Peggy Wright, showed shock and dismay, as if they still couldn't quite believe this was happening. Dina raised her hand in a small wave, not triumphant, not mocking, just acknowledging. Then she turned forward, toward the road that led to Northridge, toward her new life, toward a future that, for the first time in her 28 years, felt full of possibility instead of resignation. Are you ready? Vincent asked, taking her hand. Dina looked at her husband. What a strange and wonderful thought, and smiled. I'm ready, she said. And as the carriage rolled away from Thornhill Valley, carrying her toward a destiny she had never imagined, Dina felt the weight she had carried her entire life finally begin to lift. But neither she nor Vincent could have known that the real challenges were only beginning, that being a duchess was far more complicated than simply wearing the title, and that the court at Northridge held dangers that would make the cruelty of Thornhill Valley seem almost quaint by comparison. The journey was just beginning. Chapter 6. The Revelation of Power. The journey to Northridge took 3 days of travel through increasingly unfamiliar territory. Dina watched through the carriage window as the rough mountain landscape gradually gave way to rolling hills, then to cultivated farmland that stretched as far as the eye could see. Villages appeared with increasing frequency, real towns with cobblestone streets, proper inns, and churches with bell towers that pierced the sky. Vincent was patient with her amazement, answering her endless questions about the world beyond Thornhill Valley. He pointed out landmarks, explained the history of various estates they passed, and seemed genuinely pleased by her curiosity, rather than condescending about her ignorance. At night, they stayed in fine inns where the proprietors bowed deeply upon seeing Vincent's ducal seal. Dina was given the best rooms, served meals on china plates, treated with a deference that felt both wonderful and deeply uncomfortable. She kept expecting someone to realize she didn't belong, to expose her as the imposter she felt herself to be. But Vincent's presence beside her seemed to shield her from judgment. When she used the wrong fork or didn't know the proper way to address an innkeeper's wife, he would gently guide her without making her feel foolish. He was teaching her, she realized, preparing her for the world she was about to enter. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they crested a hill, and Vincent gestured ahead. There, he said quietly. Northridge. Deanna's breath caught in her throat. The duchy spread before them like something from a storybook. At the center rose a castle. An actual castle with stone walls and towers, flying banners that snapped in the wind. Around it sprawled a city larger than anything Deanna had imagined, with buildings of brick and stone, wide streets, and what looked like hundreds, no, thousands of people going about their business. That's where we'll live? Dina asked, her voice small. That's home, Vincent confirmed. I know it looks overwhelming, but you'll adjust. I promise. As they descended toward the city, Dina noticed people stopping to stare at the carriage. Some waved enthusiastically, others simply watched with curious eyes. Word of Vincent's marriage had clearly preceded them. The castle gates opened as they approached, and guards in matching uniforms saluted sharply. The carriage rolled into a courtyard where servants already waited in neat lines, ready to welcome their new duchess. Dina felt her stomach clench with anxiety. This was real. This was happening. She was about to step out of this carriage and be expected to act like a duchess when she barely knew how to act like a lady. Vincent must have sensed her panic because he took her hand and squeezed gently. Breathe. Just be yourself. That's all anyone needs you to be. Your Grace, a tall, dignified woman stepped forward as Vincent helped Dina from the carriage. She was perhaps 60 years old, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant knot, and eyes that assessed Dina with professional thoroughness. Welcome home. And Your Grace, she turned to Dina with a respectful curtsy. Welcome to Northridge. I am Mrs. Catherine Brennan, the head housekeeper. If you need anything at all, you need only ask. Thank you, Dina managed, relieved when her voice came out steady. The staff was introduced one by one. The butler, the cook, various maids and footmen whose names Dina knew she would never remember. Each curtsied or bowed, greeting her with Your Grace in tones ranging from genuine warmth to careful neutrality. She could see some of them trying not to stare at her simple traveling dress, her work-worn hands, her complete lack of aristocratic bearing. Mrs. Brennan will help you settle in, Vincent said as they entered the castle proper. I need to meet with my steward about some urgent business that accumulated during my absence. Will you be all right for a few hours? Dina wanted to beg him not to leave her alone, but she forced herself to nod. I'll be fine. Vincent kissed her forehead gently, an affectionate gesture that made several servants smile, and disappeared down a corridor, already calling for his steward. Come, Your Grace, Mrs. Brennan said kindly. Let me show you to your chambers. You must be exhausted from the journey. The castle was a labyrinth of corridors and staircases. Mrs. Brennan maintained a steady stream of information. As they walked, this corridor led to the library, that one to the formal dining hall. The east wing housed guest quarters. The west wing was the Duke's private residence, where Dina would now live. Finally, they reached a set of double doors that Mrs. Brennan opened with a flourish. Your private chambers, Your Grace. Dina stepped inside and felt her legs go weak. The room was enormous, larger than her entire family's cottage in Thornhill Valley. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in silk curtains the color of deep sapphire. Windows overlooked the city and countryside beyond. Fine furniture gleamed with polish. Paintings adorned the walls. A separate sitting area featured comfortable chairs arranged around a fireplace. The dressing room is through that door. Mrs. Brennan indicated. Your private bath is beyond that, and this door connects to His Grace's chambers, should you wish to communicate. Dina felt her cheeks burn at the implication. The marriage hadn't been consummated yet. Vincent had been respectful of her need to adjust to everything else first, but presumably at some point, that would change. I've taken the liberty of ordering some temporary clothing for you, Mrs. Brennan continued, opening the wardrobe to reveal several dresses in various styles. Nothing too formal, just enough until the seamstresses can make your proper wardrobe. I hope the sizes are acceptable. I had to estimate. This is all too much, Dina whispered, running her hand over the silk of the nearest dress. I don't deserve. Your Grace, Mrs. Brennan interrupted gently but firmly. May I speak plainly? Dina nodded, grateful for any guidance. I've served this house for 40 years. I watched His Grace grow from a boy to a man. I've seen him surrounded by ladies of rank and fortune, all vying for his attention. He never looked at any of them the way he looks at you. Whatever brought you two together, whatever your background, he chose you. And that makes you worthy of every bit of this. She gestured at the magnificent room. Now, let me help you change into something more comfortable, and then I'll have tea sent up. You need rest. Over the next hour, Mrs. Brennan helped Deanna navigate the overwhelming process of simply existing in this new world. She showed her how to ring for servants, explained the schedule of meals, and gently corrected small errors in etiquette that Deanna didn't even know she was making. The other servants? Deanna asked hesitantly as Mrs. Brennan poured tea with expert precision. What do they think of me? The housekeeper was quiet for a moment, clearly choosing her words carefully. They're curious. Your Grace. His Grace's marriage came as a surprise to everyone. Some are reserved in their judgment, others are genuinely happy for him. Give them time. Let them see your character. That's all anyone can do. What about the nobles? The court? Mrs. Brennan's expression became more guarded. That will be more complicated. The nobility can be particular about bloodlines and connections. You may face resistance, but you have His Grace's support. And that counts for more than you might think. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young maid entered with a curtsy. Your Grace, His Grace requests your presence in the south drawing room when you're available. He says there's someone who wishes to meet you. Deanna's anxiety spiked immediately. Someone? His Grace's closest advisor, I believe, Your Grace. Lord Thornton. Deanna froze. Thornton. The name Vincent had specifically told her not to use. But surely it was just coincidence. Thornton was a common enough name. Tell His Grace I'll be there shortly, Deanna said, trying to keep her voice steady. After the maid left, Mrs. Brennan helped her change into one of the new dresses, a deep green that brought out her eyes. She fixed Deanna's hair in a simple but elegant style and stepped back to assess her work. Perfect, the housekeeper declared. You look every inch a duchess. Deanna didn't feel like a duchess. She felt like an imposter wearing a costume. But she followed Mrs. Brennan's directions through the castle corridors until they reached the south drawing room. Vincent stood by the window, and beside him was a man perhaps 10 years older, distinguished, with graying hair and sharp eyes that assessed Deanna with unconcealed interest as she entered. Deanna, Vincent said warmly, crossing to take her hand. I want you to meet Christopher Dyer, Lord Thornton, my chief advisor and closest friend since childhood. Christopher, this is my wife, Deanna. Christopher bowed deeply. Your Grace, it's an honor. Vincent has told me so much about you. Lord Thornton, Deanna replied, managing a curtsy that wasn't too awkward. I'm pleased to meet you. Please, call me Christopher. We're practically family now. His smile was genuine, but his eyes continued their assessment. I must say Vincent's letters didn't do you justice. He said you were kind and strong, but I see you're also quite beautiful. Christopher, Vincent said with mild warning in his tone. What? I'm complimenting your wife. Surely that's allowed. Christopher turned back to Deanna. Forgive me if I'm too forward. Your Grace. It's a habit born of knowing Vincent too long. He tolerates my impertinence because I'm occasionally useful. Despite her nervousness, Deanna found herself warming to Christopher. There was something disarming about his directness, a lack of the false courtesy that made conversations feel like verbal fencing matches. Vincent mentioned you've been managing things in his absence, Deanna said, attempting conversation. Someone had to. The duchy doesn't run itself, though Vincent seems to think it should. Christopher shot his friend an affectionate look. I'm glad he's back, though the circumstances of his return are certainly surprising. Christopher knows everything, Vincent said, reading Deanna's concern. About my time in Thornhill Valley. About how we met. He's completely trustworthy. And completely shocked, Christopher added. When Vincent's letter arrived saying he'd married a woman from the valley, I thought he'd lost his mind. No offense, Your Grace. None taken, Deanna said. I thought the same thing when he proposed. Christopher laughed a genuine, delighted sound. I like her, Vincent. She has spirit. That's good. She'll need it. What do you mean? Deanna asked, catching the serious undertone beneath his levity. The two men exchanged a look. Christopher's expression sobered. Your Grace. May I speak frankly? Please do. I'd rather know what I'm facing than be sheltered from it. Very well. Christopher moved to sit in one of the elegant chairs, gesturing for Deanna and Vincent to do the same. The court is in an uproar. News of Vincent's sudden marriage has spread throughout the kingdom. Many nobles, particularly those with unmarried daughters, are displeased. They wanted Vincent to marry their daughters, Dina said, understanding immediately. For political alliances. Exactly. Vincent is one of the most powerful nobles in the kingdom. His choice of bride carries significant political implications. By marrying you, forgive me for being blunt, he married someone with no family connections, no political value, no dowry to strengthen alliances. I know. Dina said quietly. I know I bring nothing to this marriage except myself. That's not true, Vincent interjected sharply. You bring integrity, compassion, strength, which are wonderful qualities in a person, Christopher interrupted gently, but mean very little to nobles concerned with power and influence. Your Grace, he addressed Deanna directly, you need to understand what you're walking into. There will be those who resent you, who see you as an upstart, a nobody who somehow tricked their way into one of the highest positions in the land. They will test you. They will look for ways to undermine you. They will spread rumors and gossip designed to make Vincent regret his choice. Christopher, Vincent's voice held warning. She needs to know. Better she hears it from me, in private, than discovers it in some humiliating public encounter. Christopher turned back to Deanna. I'm not trying to frighten you. I'm trying to prepare you. This life, the court, the politics, the constant maneuvering for position, it's brutal, and they will be particularly brutal to you because you're an easy target. Because I don't know how to be a duchess, Dina said. Because they don't know you yet, Christopher corrected. They see only what you lack: pedigree, education, connections. They don't see what Vincent sees. But they will. If you're strong enough to show them. Dina sat in silence, processing this. She had known intellectually that being a duchess would be difficult. But hearing it stated so plainly brought the reality crashing home. She was about to enter a world designed to reject her, filled with people who would actively work to prove she didn't belong. There's a gathering in 3 days, Christopher continued. A formal reception to introduce you to the court. It will be your first major public appearance as Duchess of Northridge. Every important family in the kingdom will be there, all of them watching to see if you live up to your new position, or, more likely, watching to see you fail. Then I won't fail, Deanna said, lifting her chin. The words came out stronger than she felt, but once spoken she found she meant them. I didn't survive 28 years in Thornhill Valley just to be defeated by nobles who think they're better than me. Christopher's face split into a wide grin. Vincent, I take back everything. She's perfect for you, absolutely perfect. Vincent was smiling too, pride evident in his expression. I told you she was extraordinary. You did, I just didn't believe you. Christopher stood, bowing to Dina. Your Grace, I am at your service. If you need advice, guidance, or someone to explain why certain nobles are insufferable, I'm your man. Thank you, Christopher, Deanna said sincerely. I appreciate your honesty. It's refreshing. After Christopher left, Vincent pulled Deanna close, wrapping his arms around her. She leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. Are you all right? He asked quietly. I'm terrified, she admitted. But I'm also angry. I'm tired of people looking at me and seeing nothing of value. I'm tired of being dismissed and underestimated. Then show them who you really are, Vincent murmured into her hair. Show them the strength I saw at that creek. The dignity you maintained despite years of cruelty. The kindness you showed my brother when he was a dying stranger. Show them all of that, and they'll have no choice but to recognize your worth. What if it's not enough? What if I embarrass you? Vincent pulled back to look at her face, his expression serious. Deanna, listen to me carefully. You could stand up at that reception and recite nursery rhymes while doing cartwheels, and I would still be proud you're my wife. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted. Deanna felt tears prick her eyes. How did I get so lucky to find you? Luck had nothing to do with it. It was fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. We were meant to find each other. Vincent kissed her forehead gently. Now, let's have dinner. Tomorrow, we'll begin preparing you for the reception. Mrs. Brennan will help with etiquette. Christopher will brief you on the important families, and I'll be there for whatever you need. We'll face this together, like partners. That night, lying in her enormous bed in her magnificent chamber, Deanna stared at the painted ceiling and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the most despised woman in Thornhill Valley to the Duchess of Northridge, from carrying water buckets to dining on china plates, from having no future to facing a future so vast and uncertain it took her breath away. Somewhere in the castle, Vincent slept in his own chamber, respecting her need for time to adjust. But she could feel his presence, his support, his unwavering belief in her worth. And for the first time since accepting his proposal, Deanna felt something shift inside her. The fear didn't disappear, but it was joined by something else: determination. Christopher was right that the nobles would try to tear her down. Peggy Wright and Eula Leonard multiplied by 100, all with more power and sharper weapons. But Deanna had survived Thornhill Valley. She had endured years of cruelty and emerged with her compassion intact. She had carried those heavy water buckets day after day without complaint. She had strength she had never fully recognized, the kind of strength born not from privilege but from survival. Let the nobles come with their tests and their judgment. She would face them the same way she had faced everything else in her life, with dignity, with quiet determination, and with the knowledge that her worth wasn't determined by their opinion of her. 3 days until the reception. 3 days to prepare for the battle ahead. Deanna closed her eyes and made a silent promise to herself. She would not fail, not because failure would embarrass Vincent, but because she had spent too many years being told she wasn't good enough. It was time to prove everyone wrong. Chapter 7. The Court's Judgment. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation that left Deanna's head spinning. Mrs. Brennan drilled her on etiquette: how to greet a duke versus a count, when to curtsy, and when a simple nod would suffice, which fork to use for which course during formal dinners. Christopher provided detailed briefings on the major noble families, their alliances, their rivalries, and most importantly, their likely attitudes toward her. Lady Constance Hartley, Christopher said, showing Deanna a miniature portrait of a beautiful blonde woman, widow of the late Duke of Westmarch. She's been positioning herself to become Vincent's wife for the past 2 years. She will hate you on principle. Wonderful, Deanna muttered, studying the woman's perfect features. Lord Byron Sampson, Christopher continued, moving to the next portrait. One of the wealthiest men in the kingdom. His daughter, Caroline, was considered the front-runner for Vincent's hand before you appeared. He will see your marriage as a personal insult. Is there anyone who won't hate me? Some, Christopher admitted. There are nobles who appreciate Vincent's unconventional choice, who see it as romantic rather than politically foolish. But they'll be in the minority. At least initially. Vincent joined these preparation sessions when he could, between meetings with his steward and catching up on duchy business. He would sit beside Deanna, holding her hand, offering encouragement when the sheer volume of information became overwhelming. You don't have to memorize everything, he assured her after one particularly grueling session. Christopher is being thorough to a fault. Just remember the basics, be yourself, and let me handle the political maneuvering. I want to be useful to you, Deanna protested. Not just some decoration you have to protect. You are useful. More useful than you realize. Vincent brushed a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. You give me something I've never had at court: someone I can trust completely. Someone who has no hidden agenda, no ulterior motives. That's worth more than all the political alliances in the kingdom. The seamstresses worked around the clock to create a proper wardrobe, but for the reception, they had outdone themselves. The gown was a masterpiece, deep sapphire silk, that brought out the color of Deanna's eyes, with delicate silver embroidery that caught the light with every movement. The neckline was modest but elegant, the sleeves fitted to her arms perfectly, and the skirt fell in graceful folds that made her feel like she was wearing liquid starlight. You look like a queen, Mrs. Brennan said with satisfaction, as she made final adjustments to Deanna's hair. She had styled it in an intricate arrangement that looked effortless but had taken nearly an hour to perfect. Deanna stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror and barely recognized herself. The woman looking back at her was elegant, poised, aristocratic. She looked like she belonged in a castle, like she deserved the title of duchess. But inside, she still felt like the girl carrying water buckets, waiting for someone to expose her as a fraud. Remember, Mrs. Brennan said, placing a gentle hand on Deanna's shoulder. You are the Duchess of Northridge. These people may have been born to privilege, but you earned your place through character. Hold your head high. A knock at the door announced Vincent's arrival. Mrs. Brennan opened it, then stepped aside with a knowing smile. Vincent stood in the doorway, in formal court attire, a black coat with silver buttons, a crisp white shirt, a burgundy vest embroidered with his ducal crest. He looked every inch the powerful nobleman he was. But when he saw Deanna, his careful composure cracked, and his face filled with such genuine awe that she felt her anxiety ease slightly. "Dina," he breathed. I have no words." "Is it too much?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "It's perfect. You're perfect." He crossed the room and took her hands, careful not to disturb her carefully arranged hair. "Are you ready?" "No," she admitted, "but I don't think I'll ever be ready, so we might as well proceed." Vincent smiled. "That's my Duchess. Come, let's show the court what they've been missing." The reception was held in the castle's grand ballroom, a space so vast and ornate that Deanna felt dizzy just looking at it. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting prismatic light across the polished marble floors. Musicians played soft music from a raised platform, and everywhere, absolutely everywhere, were nobles in their finest attire, glittering with jewels and privilege. The conversation died as Vincent and Deanna appeared at the top of the grand staircase. Hundreds of eyes turned to assess the new Duchess. Deanna felt the weight of their collective judgment like a physical force pressing against her chest. "Breathe," Vincent murmured. "And smile. Let them see confidence." Deanna forced her lips into what she hoped was a gracious smile, and descended the stairs on Vincent's arm. Every step felt precarious, as if she might stumble and tumble down in front of everyone. But she made it to the bottom without incident, and the musicians struck up a more formal melody. "Ladies and gentlemen," the chamberlain's voice rang out. "His Grace, the Duke of Northridge, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Northridge." Polite applause followed, though Deanna could hear the whispers underneath it. "Is that her? So plain, really. I expected someone more impressive." What was Vincent thinking? Look at how she walks, no grace at all. Vincent's grip on her arm tightened slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to remind her he was there. They moved into the crowd, and immediately nobles began approaching, eager to be formally introduced to the mysterious woman who had captured the Duke's heart. "Your Grace," said a tall, distinguished man with silver hair. "Lord Calvin Benjamin. May I say what an honor it is to meet you?" Vincent has always had exquisite taste. "Thank you, Lord Benjamin," Deanna replied, grateful when her voice came out steady. "That's very kind. And where did you say your family hails from?" asked the woman beside him, Lady Benjamin, presumably. "Thornhill Valley," Deanna said simply. "In the mountain territories." "Thornhill Valley," Lady Benjamin repeated, clearly never having heard of it. "How quaint. And your father's title?" "He has none. He's a farmer." The silence that followed was deafening. Lady Benjamin's smile froze on her face. Lord Benjamin looked deeply uncomfortable. Around them, other nobles who had been pretending not to listen now stared openly. "A farmer," Lady Benjamin said faintly. "I see. My wife's worth isn't determined by her father's occupation," Vincent said coolly. "It's determined by her character. Something that seems to be in short supply among certain members of the nobility." Lord Benjamin had the grace to look embarrassed. "Of course, Your Grace, I meant no offense." They moved on, but the damage was done. The whispers grew louder, more pointed. Deanna could feel eyes following her, hear the barely concealed mockery in the voices around her. "Did you hear? A farmer's daughter. No wonder she has no bearing. She probably milked cows before this." How utterly humiliating for Vincent. Though I suppose even dukes make mistakes. Each comment felt like a small cut, and Deanna had to fight the urge to turn and run from the ballroom. This was worse than Thornhill Valley. At least there, she had known what to expect. Here, the cruelty was wrapped in elegant language and false smiles, making it somehow more insidious. "Your Grace," a smooth voice said behind them. Deanna turned to find the woman from Christopher's briefing, Lady Constance Hartley. She was even more beautiful in person, with perfect golden hair and eyes like chips of ice. "How wonderful to finally meet you. Vincent has been keeping you quite hidden away." "Lady Constance," Vincent said, his tone carefully neutral. "May I present my wife, Deanna?" "Deanna, this is Lady Constance Hartley." "A pleasure," Constance said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. You must tell me everything about yourself. I'm absolutely fascinated. How does a farmer's daughter end up married to one of the most powerful men in the kingdom? It's quite the fairy tale. The word fairy tale dripped with condescension. Deanna recognized the tactic. It was the same one Peggy Wright had used for years, disguising cruelty as curiosity. It's not a fairy tale, Deanna said quietly. It's just life. Sometimes people find each other despite different circumstances. How poetic, Constance said. Though I do wonder, and forgive me for being forward, but don't you find court life terribly confusing? All the rules and protocols? It must be so different from… What was it, Thornhill Valley? It is different, Deanna admitted. But I'm learning. Of course you are. With Vincent as your teacher, how could you not? Constance placed a delicate hand on Vincent's arm, a gesture of casual intimacy that made Deanna's stomach tighten. Vincent is so patient. Remember when you taught me to dance the pavani, Vincent? I was absolutely hopeless at first, but you were so encouraging. That was years ago, Constance, Vincent said, smoothly removing her hand from his arm. If you'll excuse us, I see Christopher signaling. As they walked away, Deanna felt her composure cracking. She's in love with you. She's in love with my title. Vincent corrected. There's a difference. She's beautiful, educated. She knows how to be a duchess. I don't understand why you didn't marry someone like her. Vincent stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Around them, the party continued, but he seemed oblivious to the watching eyes. Because she's not you. Because when I talk to her, I feel nothing. When I'm with you, I feel everything. Do you understand the difference? Before Deanna could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A man had entered late, making a dramatic entrance. He was perhaps 40, with dark hair graying at the temples and an air of authority that commanded immediate attention. Who is that? Deanna whispered to Vincent. Vincent's expression had gone carefully blank. Lord Jordan McBride, the king's first counsel, and my father's oldest enemy. Jordan's eyes swept the ballroom and landed on Vincent and Deanna. A slow smile spread across his face, predatory and pleased. He began making his way toward them, the crowd parting before him like water before a ship's prow. Vincent, Jordan said when he reached them, his voice carrying clearly. How good to see you. And this must be your new bride, the one everyone's been talking about. Lord McBride, Vincent said coolly. I didn't realize you'd be attending. Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world. The Duke of Northridge's wedding is quite the event. Even if it is rather unconventional. Jordan turned his full attention to Deanna, and she felt pinned under his gaze like a butterfly on a collector's board. Your Grace, congratulations on your remarkable elevation in status. From peasant to duchess, truly. It's the stuff of legends. The word peasant hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Around them, nobles watched with barely concealed anticipation, waiting to see how Deanna would respond. Vincent stepped forward, his voice dangerous. Choose your next words carefully, McBride. I'm merely stating facts, Jordan said innocently, no insult intended. I'm sure Her Grace is perfectly adequate for her new role, though I must say, Vincent, I'm surprised. Your father always insisted on the importance of breeding, of bloodlines. I wonder what he would think of this match. My father is dead, Vincent said flatly. His opinions no longer matter, don't they? Jordan's smile widened. I wonder. You carry his name, his title, his responsibilities. Can you truly escape his legacy? Or will you eventually realize, as he always knew, that some things matter more than romantic notions? Things like duty, alliance, the strength of noble blood? Deanna felt something inside her snap. For 3 days, she had endured lessons on etiquette, on being polite, on playing by the rules of this world. But these rules were designed to keep people like her in their place, to make her feel small and inadequate, while nobles like Jordan used pretty words to mask their cruelty. She was tired of feeling small. Lord McBride, she said, her voice clear and carrying. The ballroom grew quieter as people strained to hear. You speak of bloodlines as if they determine worth, as if being born into privilege automatically makes someone valuable. But from where I'm standing, you're just a man. No better. No worse than any other. Your title didn't make you kind. Your breeding didn't teach you compassion. Your bloodline didn't give you wisdom. You have all the advantages of nobility, and yet you use them to belittle someone you don't even know. That doesn't make you noble. It makes you small." The silence that followed was absolute. Jordan's face had gone dark red. Around them, nobles stood frozen, shocked by Diana's audacity. "How dare you?" Jordan began. "I dare because I have nothing to lose," Dina interrupted, her fear transforming into something fiercer. "You all stand here judging me, mocking my background, questioning whether I deserve my position. But what have you done to deserve yours? You were born into wealth and privilege, you didn't earn it. At least I know what it means to work, to struggle, to survive without the cushion of family name and fortune. At least I know the value of kindness, because I know what it's like to need it. What do you know, Lord McBride, besides how to insult women at parties?" "Dina," Vincent said quietly, but there was admiration in his voice, not warning. Jordan's hands were clenched into fists. "You'll regret speaking to me that way." "Perhaps," Dina said, "but at least I'll regret it honestly. I won't hide my feelings behind false courtesy and veiled insults. I won't pretend to be something I'm not just to make you comfortable. If that makes me unfit for this world, then perhaps this world needs to change." She turned to Vincent. "I need some air." Vincent nodded, his eyes shining with something that might have been pride. "Of course." They walked through the stunned crowd toward the terrace doors. Behind them, the silence exploded into frantic whispers. But Diana didn't care anymore. She had spent her entire life being crushed under other people's judgment. She refused to live that way anymore, even if it meant failing as a duchess. On the terrace, the night air was cool and clean after the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. Diana gripped the stone railing, her whole body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. "I'm sorry," she said without turning around. "I know I probably just destroyed any chance of being accepted here." "You were magnificent," Vincent said, coming to stand beside her. "Absolutely magnificent. I insulted one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. You told him the truth. Something most people are too afraid to do." Vincent turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Dina, do you know what I saw in there? I saw someone with more courage than everyone in that ballroom combined. They hide behind manners and protocol, saying terrible things in polite ways. You refused to play that game. You stood up for yourself with honesty and dignity. That's exactly what this court needs. But Lord McBride is a bully who's been allowed to terrorize people for years because no one dares challenge him. You just did what dozens of nobles have wanted to do but were too cowardly to attempt." Vincent smiled. "He'll make trouble, certainly. But you've also earned respect from people who value courage over cowardice. Do you really think so?" "I know so." Vincent pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "You don't have to be like them, Diana. You don't have to become cold and calculating to survive here. Just be yourself, honest, strong, compassionate. That's all I've ever wanted. That's all you need to be." Diana rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The reception was still happening inside, and she knew they would have to return eventually. There would be consequences for her outburst. Jordan would seek revenge, others would judge her even more harshly, and the whispers would multiply. But for this moment, standing in Vincent's arms under the stars, Diana felt something she had never experienced before. Not just hope, but pride. Pride in herself, in her refusal to be diminished, in her choice to be honest rather than polite. She was the Duchess of Northridge, and she would be that Duchess on her own terms, or not at all. Inside the ballroom, the reception continued, and across the kingdom, the word began to spread of the farmer's daughter, who had become a duchess and dared to challenge a lord to his face. Some would call her foolish, others would call her brave, but everyone would remember her name. Chapter 8: The Test of Character. The morning after the reception, Dina woke to find the castle in an uproar. Servants whispered in corners, their voices dying as she passed. Mrs. Brennan appeared at her chambers with tea and a troubled expression. "Your Grace," the housekeeper said carefully, setting down the tray. "I thought you should know there's been talk. About last night." "What kind of talk?" Diana asked, though she could guess. "Some of it favorable, surprisingly. Several younger nobles have expressed admiration for your candor." But Lord McBride has been quite vocal about his displeasure. He's calling you unfit for your position. Uneducated, a disgrace to the duchy. Deanna's stomach clenched, but she kept her voice steady. What does Vincent say? His Grace is in meetings all morning, dealing with the fallout. Lord McBride is demanding an apology. Some of the older nobles are pressuring His Grace to send you away for training. To some estate where you can learn proper court manners away from public scrutiny. They want him to hide me, Deanna said flatly. Mrs. Brennan's silence was answer enough. After the housekeeper left, Deanna dressed herself something she'd had to relearn. As the Duchess's gowns required assistance, she was still too proud to ask for every time. She was still struggling with the buttons when Vincent entered through the connecting door, looking exhausted. You should have woken me, Deanna said, turning so he could help with the difficult fastenings. You needed rest. Vincent's fingers were deft with the buttons, his touch gentle. And I needed to handle some things. McBride wants an apology. McBride can want all he likes, he won't get one. Vincent finished the last button and turned her to face him. But Deanna, I need you to understand the situation. Jordan has significant influence at court. He's using last night to paint you as unstable, unfit, a danger to my reputation. Some nobles are listening. So they were right. I did embarrass you. No, Vincent said firmly. You stood up to a bully. But now we have to be strategic. We need to show the court that your outburst wasn't instability, it was strength. We need to prove you have the capability to be a duchess. Not despite your background, but because of it. How? By doing what you do best, being genuinely good. Vincent took her hands. There's a matter that needs attention. The northern villages have been struggling with crop failures. Families are going hungry. I was planning to send my steward to assess the situation and distribute aid. But what if you went instead? Deanna blinked. Me? But I don't know anything about managing aid distribution. You know what it's like to be hungry. To worry about your next meal. To feel helpless and forgotten. That's more valuable than any administrative training. Vincent's eyes were intense. The nobles see charity as a duty, something they do to appear benevolent. But you would do it because you genuinely care. That difference would be visible to everyone. And it would show the court I'm not just some impulsive, uneducated peasant, Deanna said, understanding the political angle. It would show them who you really are. Someone who uses power to help rather than to hurt. Vincent squeezed her hands gently. But only if you want to. I won't force you into anything. Deanna thought of the families struggling in the northern villages, families probably much like her own had been. Mothers worrying over their children. Fathers desperate for work. The kind of bone-deep fear that came from not knowing if you could feed your family tomorrow. I'll do it, she said. When do we leave? Not we. You. At her startled expression, Vincent explained. I have to stay here to manage the political situation. Christopher will accompany you, along with a small retinue. This needs to be your accomplishment, Deanna. Not something I did with you in tow. The idea of traveling without Vincent terrified her, but she understood his reasoning. She needed to prove she could function as Duchess independently, that she wasn't just Vincent's pretty appendage but a leader in her own right. All right, she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. I'll go. 2 days later, Deanna found herself in a carriage heading north with Christopher, Mrs. Brennan, who had insisted on accompanying her, and a wagon full of supplies. The landscape grew progressively bleaker as they traveled, the fields showing evidence of drought and neglect. The crop failure started last spring, Christopher explained, reviewing documents as they rode. Combination of poor rainfall and a blight that destroyed most of the wheat. The northern villages are too far from the main trade routes to easily buy supplies elsewhere. Without intervention, people will starve this winter. How many families? Deanna asked. Perhaps 200. Mostly farmers, some craftsmen. Good people who've had bad luck. When they arrived at the first village, a collection of small cottages that reminded Deanna painfully of Thornhill Valley, the response was initially wary. The villagers gathered in the small square, eyeing the fine carriage and well-dressed visitors with suspicion and desperation mixed together. Good people, Christopher began formally. Her Grace, the Duchess of Northridge, has come to— May I? Deanna interrupted quietly. At Christopher's nod, she stepped forward, leaving the formal distance between ruler and subjects that was customary. She approached the villagers directly, and up close, she could see the hollow cheeks, the threadbare clothes, the exhaustion in their eyes. She recognized all of it. "My name is Deanna," she said, deliberately using just her first name. "I grew up in a village much like this one. I know what it's like to worry about where your next meal will come from. I know what it's like to watch your parents struggle and feel helpless to change anything. I'm not here to judge you or to offer charity that makes you feel small. I'm here because I know what hunger feels like, and I don't want anyone else to experience it if I can help." The villagers exchanged glances. A woman near the front, middle-aged, with a baby on her hip and 2 small children clinging to her skirts, spoke up hesitantly. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but how would a duchess know about hunger?" "Because I wasn't always a duchess," Deanna said simply. 3 months ago, I was carrying water buckets for my family in the mountains. My parents were poor farmers. I wore hand-me-down clothes and went to bed hungry more nights than I care to remember. The only thing that's changed is my title and my dress. I'm still the same person who understands exactly what you're going through." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "You really understand." "I do." Dina turned to Christopher. "Let's distribute the supplies. And I want to talk to each family individually. I want to know what they need, not what we think they need." Over the next 3 days, Dina worked alongside the villagers, in a way that left Christopher and Mrs. Brennan simultaneously impressed and concerned about propriety. She helped unload supply wagons. She sat in humble cottages, listening to families describe their situations. She held babies while their mothers filled out requests for aid. She got her fine dress dirty, helping an elderly woman repair a leaking roof. "Your Grace," Mrs. Brennan protested at one point, "you shouldn't be doing manual labor. It's not fitting for your position." "Then my position needs to change," Deanna replied, hammering another nail into place. "These people don't need someone to stand at a distance and look regal. They need actual help." Word of the Duchess, who worked alongside commoners, spread quickly. By the time they reached the 3rd village, people were coming from surrounding areas just to meet her. Not because she was royalty, but because she was something they had never encountered before: nobility that treated them as equals. In one village, Dina found a young woman, barely 20, with 3 small children and a husband who had died in an accident months earlier. The woman, Sarah, was trying to manage their small farm alone, but it was clear she was overwhelmed and nearly broken by grief and responsibility. Dina sat with her for over an hour, not as a duchess dispensing charity, but as one woman to another who understood struggle. She arranged for neighboring farmers to help with the harvest work. She ensured Sarah would receive regular food supplies through the winter. And before she left, she held Sarah's hands and said simply, "You're stronger than you know. You'll survive this. I know you will." Sarah wept, and Deanna wept with her, much to Christopher's discomfort. But when they left that village, the people lined the road to wave goodbye, their faces showing something more valuable than gratitude. They showed hope. On the journey back to Northridge, Christopher was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, he spoke. "I owe you an apology, Your Grace." Deanna looked up from the notes she'd been making about follow-up aid that would be needed. "For what?" "For doubting you. For thinking you would need extensive coaching to handle this properly. You didn't need coaching at all. You knew exactly what to do." "I just treated them the way I would have wanted to be treated," Deanna said. "The way no one ever treated me in Thornhill Valley. It's not complicated. But that's exactly what makes it extraordinary," Christopher insisted. "Do you know what most nobles do on charitable missions? They stand at a distance, make pretty speeches, hand out supplies through intermediaries, and leave feeling virtuous without ever actually connecting with the people they're supposedly helping. You didn't do any of that. You saw them as people, not as problems to be solved. And they felt the difference. Do you think it will help? With the court, I mean?" Christopher smiled. "Word is already spreading. The village leaders are writing to Vincent, praising your compassion and effectiveness. Other nobles are hearing stories about the Duchess who got her hands dirty helping repair roofs. It's not the kind of story Jordan can easily twist into something negative." When they arrived back at the castle, Vincent was waiting in the courtyard. Dina barely had time to exit the carriage before he pulled her into an embrace, not caring who was watching. "I missed you," he murmured into her hair. "It's only been 5 days. 5 days too long." He pulled back to look at her face. Christopher sent daily reports. Dina, what you did, how you handled everything. I'm so proud of you. I just helped people. You did more than that. You showed the court what real nobility looks like. Not titles and bloodlines, but character and compassion. Vincent's eyes were shining. There's something you need to see. He led her inside to his study, where dozens of letters were spread across his desk. These arrived while you were gone, from nobles throughout the kingdom. Condemning me? Dina guessed, her stomach sinking. Read them. She picked up the nearest letter. It was from Lord Calvin Benjamin, the man whose wife had been so condescending at the reception. Your Grace. I write to apologize for my wife's treatment of the Duchess at the recent reception. We have heard reports of her charitable work in the northern villages, and I am ashamed to admit we judged her harshly without knowing her character. She has shown more genuine nobility in 1 week than most of us show in a lifetime. Please convey our respect and admiration. Diana picked up another letter, then another. Most were variations on the same theme, nobles who had mocked her now expressing respect, admiration, even apology. But not everyone, Vincent said, pointing to a separate pile. Jordan is still calling for your removal, and some of the older, more traditional nobles agree with him. They see your work in the villages as beneath your station, unbecoming of a duchess. So I'm still fighting an uphill battle. We both are, Vincent corrected. But we're winning more ground than we're losing. The younger nobles especially are rallying to your side. You're becoming something unexpected, a symbol of change. Of what nobility could be if it actually lived up to its name. There was a knock at the door. A servant entered with a message. Your Grace, Lady Constance Hartley is here. She requests an audience with the Duchess. Diana and Vincent exchanged glances. That's unexpected, Vincent said. Do you want to see her? Every instinct told Diana to refuse. Constance had been cruel at the reception, and there was no reason to think this visit would be anything but more of the same. But refusing to see her would be seen as cowardice or pettiness. I'll see her, Diana said. Alone. Dana, if I'm going to be a duchess, I need to handle situations like this myself. Trust me. Vincent looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. I'll be right outside if you need me. A few minutes later, Constance entered the study. She looked as perfect as ever, blonde hair styled immaculately, dress that probably cost more than Diana's family cottage in Thornhill Valley. But there was something different in her expression. Something that might have been uncertainty. Your Grace, Constance said with a curtsy that seemed sincere. Thank you for seeing me. Lady Constance, Dina replied neutrally. What can I do for you? I came to apologize. The words came out stiffly, as if Constance wasn't accustomed to saying them. My behavior at the reception was inexcusable. I was cruel, and I'm ashamed of it. Dina studied the other woman carefully, trying to determine if this was genuine or another political game. What changed? I heard about what you did in the northern villages, about how you worked alongside commoners, how you treated them with dignity and respect. Constance met her eyes directly. I've been a noble my entire life, and I've never once done anything that actually helped anyone. I dispense charity because it's expected, but I've never truly cared about the people I'm supposedly serving. You've been a duchess for mere weeks, and you're already doing more good than I've done in 30 years. That's not true. It is true, Constance interrupted, and it's made me realize something painful. I wanted to marry Vincent because of his title, his power, his wealth. I never once thought about what I could offer him beyond political connections and an acceptable bloodline. But you give him something real. Partnership. Genuine affection. Someone who sees him as a person rather than a prize to be won. Diana was silent, not sure how to respond. I don't expect you to forgive me, Constance continued. But I wanted you to know that you've changed my mind. About you. About what matters. About what nobility should mean. And for what it's worth, I think Vincent chose well. Better than I would have admitted at the reception. Thank you, Diana said quietly. That means more than you know. After Constance left, Diana stood alone in the study, processing what had just happened. She had come to Northridge expecting to face constant opposition, to battle against nobles determined to prove her unworthy. And while that battle was far from over, Jordan and his allies would continue fighting. She was beginning to see that change was possible. Not everyone would accept her. Not everyone would respect her. But some would. And maybe, just maybe, she could use her position to do more than simply survive in this world. Maybe she could actually change it. Vincent entered quietly. How did it go? Better than expected, Deanna admitted. She apologized. I think she meant it. That's Constance's way of admitting defeat. When she can't win, she changes sides. Vincent pulled Deanna close. One battle down, many more to come. I know. Deanna leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. But I'm not afraid anymore. Or rather, I'm still afraid, but I'm not letting fear stop me. That's all anyone can ask. Vincent kissed her forehead gently. Now, there's one more thing. I've been planning something. A surprise. What kind of surprise? You'll see tomorrow. For tonight, let's have dinner. Just the two of us. No politics, no nobles. No pressure. Just us. That night, dining privately with Vincent in their chambers, Deanna felt something settle inside her, a peace she hadn't experienced since accepting his proposal. She was still learning, still making mistakes, still facing opposition from powerful people who wanted her to fail. But she was also making a difference. Helping people. Proving that nobility could mean something more than privilege and power. And she was doing it all alongside a man who loved her not despite her background, but because of the strength that background had given her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Jordan's campaign against her would continue. More nobles would test her, judge her, try to find ways to prove she didn't belong. But tonight, sitting across from Vincent in the candlelight, Deanna felt something she had never felt in Thornhill Valley. She felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Chapter 9. The final challenge. The surprise Vincent had mentioned turned out to be a visit from Deanna's family. She stood in the castle's receiving room. Her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white, as a servant announced their arrival. She hadn't seen her parents or brothers since the wedding, and the thought of facing them in this context, her in a duchess's gown, them in their simple country clothes, filled her with a complicated mixture of emotions. The doors opened, and her family entered. Her father looked diminished somehow, smaller than she remembered. He held his worn hat in his hands, his eyes darting around the opulent room with obvious discomfort. Her mother walked behind him, her face carefully neutral, though Deanna could see the calculation in her eyes as she assessed every detail of her daughter's new life. Her brothers, Thomas and William, looked awkward and out of place, like young trees transplanted into foreign soil. Mother, father, Deanna said, her voice formal despite herself. Thomas. William. Welcome to Northridge. Your Grace, her father said, and the title sounded strange coming from his lips. He attempted an awkward bow. Please, father, you don't need to bow to me. I'm still your daughter. Are you? Her mother's voice was sharp, her eyes taking in Deanna's elaborate dress, her styled hair, the servants hovering discreetly in the background. You look like a stranger, like someone who's forgotten where she came from. The accusation stung, especially because part of Deanna had worried about exactly that becoming a duchess would somehow erase the person she had been. I haven't forgotten, Deanna said quietly. I could never forget. Vincent entered then, his timing perfect as always. He greeted Deanna's family with warmth and respect, putting them at ease in a way Deanna hadn't managed. He insisted they stay at the castle for a week, giving them the guest quarters in the East Wing. He arranged for tours of the city, entertainment, everything they could possibly want. But as the days passed, Deanna began to see her family through new eyes. Her father spent most of his time meeting with Vincent's steward, discussing business opportunities that Deanna recognized as thinly veiled attempts to extract money or position from their connection to the duchy. Her mother criticized everything: the castle was too cold, the food too rich, the servants too familiar. But she also made lists of things she wanted Deanna to send back to Thornhill Valley. Expensive fabrics and furnishings that would establish the Avila family as people of importance. Only her brothers seemed genuinely happy to see her. Thomas, the elder at 16, was fascinated by the castle and asked endless questions about how it was run. William, 14, was more interested in the horses and spent most of his time in the stables. On the fourth day, Deanna found her mother alone in the guest quarters, examining a silver candlestick with calculating eyes. Mother, Deanna said from the doorway. Can we talk? Helen set down the candlestick quickly, as if she'd been caught doing something improper. Of course. What is it? Why did you really come here? Her mother's face hardened. Can't a mother visit her daughter? You could, but that's not why you're here, is it? You're here because I'm useful now. Because I can give you things: money, status, connections, all the things you always wanted but could never have. Don't take that tone with me, Helen snapped. I'm still your mother. Are you? Deanna threw her mother's earlier words back at her. Because mothers are supposed to love their daughters. Support them. Make them feel valued. You did none of those things. You made my entire life a misery. And now that I have something you want, suddenly you're here, acting as if we're a loving family. Helen's face flushed with anger. You have no idea what it was like. Trying to raise a family with nothing. Watching you get older with no prospects. Knowing you'd be dependent on us forever. Do you think I wanted to be cruel? I was desperate, Deanna. Desperate and scared. And trying to prepare you for a harsh world. By making me believe I was worthless. By making you realistic. Look where we live, look at our lives. There's no room for dreams and softness when you're poor. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment. You weren't protecting me. You were taking out your own disappointments on me. Deanna's voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. And now you're here, not because you're proud of me, or happy for me, but because you see an opportunity to improve your own situation. And what's wrong with that? Helen demanded. You have everything now: wealth, position, power. Would it hurt you to share some of that with your family? With the people who raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head? I will help you, Deanna said. Vincent already arranged for your cottage to be improved, for your land to be expanded. You'll never want for money or security again. But don't pretend this visit is about love. Don't pretend you suddenly care about me now that I'm useful. Her mother stared at her for a long moment, emotions warring across her face. Finally, something seemed to break. Her shoulders sagged. And for the first time, Deanna saw her mother look genuinely old and tired. You're right, Helen said quietly. I came here because I saw an opportunity. Because that's what I've done my entire life. Look for opportunities, calculate advantages, try to survive. But Deanna. She paused, seeming to struggle with words. I wasn't always like this. When I was young, before the hardship and disappointment ground me down, I was different, softer. And then life became about survival, and somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything else. It wasn't quite an apology. It wasn't even really an explanation. But it was more honesty than her mother had ever shown her. I don't need you to be different, Deanna said, surprising herself. I don't need you to suddenly become the loving mother you never were. But I need you to stop pretending. If you want help, ask for it honestly. Don't dress it up as maternal concern. Helen nodded slowly. I can do that. They didn't embrace. Didn't suddenly become the mother and daughter they had never been. But there was a truth between them now, harsh and uncomfortable, but real. That evening, Vincent found Deanna on the terrace overlooking the gardens, staring at the sunset. Your mother told me about your conversation, he said, joining her at the railing. Are you all right? I think so. It's strange, I thought confronting her would feel triumphant, like I was finally standing up to years of cruelty, but mostly I just feel sad. Sad for her, for me, for all the years we could have had a real relationship if circumstances had been different. You're more generous than I would be, Vincent observed. Not generous. Just tired of carrying anger. It's too heavy. Deanna leaned against him, grateful for his steady presence. But it made me realize something. I was so focused on proving myself worthy to the nobles, to the court, to everyone watching. But I never thought about proving myself to my own family, about showing them that I'm more than they ever believed I could be. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Vincent said firmly. Maybe not. But I want to anyway. She turned to face him. I want to use this position, this power I never asked for, to help people like my family. People who are trapped by poverty and circumstances. People who become cruel because life gives them no room for kindness. I can't change my past, but maybe I can change someone else's future. Vincent smiled, pulling her close. Have I mentioned lately that I made the right choice in marrying you? Before Dina could respond, Christopher appeared at the terrace doors, his expression serious. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Lord McBride has made his move. They returned to Vincent's study, where Christopher had spread several documents across the desk. Jordan's filed a formal complaint with the King's Council. He's claiming that your marriage is invalid. On what grounds? Vincent demanded. He's arguing that Dina married you under false pretenses that she couldn't have given proper consent because she didn't understand what she was agreeing to. That someone of her background couldn't possibly comprehend the responsibilities and obligations of a duchess, therefore the marriage contract is void. Dina felt her stomach drop. Can he do that? He can try, Christopher said grimly. The King's Council will have to hear the case. It's scheduled for 3 days from now. Vincent will represent you, but Jordan is demanding you be present as well. He wants to question you directly, to humiliate her, Vincent said, his voice cold with fury. To make her look foolish and uneducated in front of the entire council. That's exactly what he wants. Christopher agreed. It's a calculated move. Even if the council doesn't invalidate the marriage, and I don't think they will, Jordan wins if he makes Dina look incompetent in public. Then I won't be incompetent, Dina said, her voice steadier than she felt. What do I need to know? Over the next 3 days, Christopher drilled her relentlessly on court procedures, legal terminology, and how to respond to hostile questioning. Mrs. Brennan helped her select appropriate attire formal enough to show respect for the council, but not so elaborate that she looked like she was trying too hard. Vincent was uncharacteristically quiet, and Deanna could see the worry in his eyes. What if they rule against us? She asked the night before the hearing. They won't. But what if they do? What happens to us? Vincent took her hands, his grip tight. Then we fight it. We appeal to the king himself if necessary. But Dina, I need you to understand no matter what happens, you're my wife. A piece of paper from the council doesn't change that. I chose you. And I will keep choosing you, regardless of what anyone says. The morning of the hearing, Dina woke with her stomach in knots. She dressed carefully in a gown of deep burgundy, dignified and serious. Mrs. Brennan styled her hair simply but elegantly. When Deanna looked in the mirror, she saw someone who looked capable and composed. She just hoped she could maintain that appearance under Jordan's attack. The King's Council chambers were imposing, a large hall with high ceilings and stern portraits of previous monarchs looking down with judgment. The council members sat in elevated seats, 7 of them in total, all men of advanced age and considerable power. At the far end sat Lord Ashford, the king's representative, who would oversee the proceedings. Jordan sat at one table with his advisors, looking confident and self-satisfied. Vincent and Dina took their places at the opposite table, Christopher beside them. The hearing began with Jordan's arguments delivered in smooth, persuasive tones that made Deanna's blood boil. Gentlemen of the council, I bring this matter before you with regret, but also with certainty that justice must be served. The Duke of Northridge, in his enthusiasm for romance, has entered into a marriage that cannot stand legal scrutiny. The woman in question, he gestured dismissively at Deanna, is a farmer's daughter with no education, no understanding of noble obligations, no comprehension of what being a duchess actually entails. She couldn't have given informed consent because she literally didn't know what she was consenting to. That's an interesting argument, Vincent said coldly when it was his turn. It suggests that only people born into nobility can understand nobility, that education and birth determine capability. By that logic, no one could ever rise above their station, and merit would mean nothing. Is that really the precedent this council wants to set? The debate went back and forth, legal arguments piling upon each other, and then Lord Ashford spoke. We've heard the legal arguments. Now I'd like to hear from the Duchess herself. His eyes fixed on Deanna. Your Grace, Lord McBride claims you didn't understand what you were agreeing to when you married the Duke. What do you say to that? This was at the moment Jordan had been waiting for, the chance to make her look foolish. Deanna stood, her legs trembling but her voice steady. Lord Ashford, members of the council, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. Lord McBride is correct about one thing. I didn't fully understand what being a duchess would entail when I married Vincent. How could I? I'd never been one before. But does that invalidate my consent? Does anyone truly understand marriage before they enter it? Does any bride, noble or common, really know all the challenges and responsibilities that await her? She took a breath, finding her confidence. What I did understand was that Vincent offered me partnership, respect, and a chance to build a life with someone who valued me. I understood that he saw worth in me that others had missed. I understood that he was asking me to stand beside him, not behind him. And I understood that accepting his proposal meant accepting responsibilities I would have to learn and grow into. But you had no training, Jordan began. I had 28 years of training, Dina interrupted, her voice sharp. Training in resilience, in survival, in maintaining dignity, despite constant humiliation. I learned how to work hard, how to persist when life was unfair, how to remain kind when the world showed me no kindness. Those lessons have served me well as Duchess, perhaps better than all the formal education in the world. She turned to face the council directly. I've spent the last months working in the northern villages, helping families facing starvation. I didn't do it perfectly, I'm still learning. But I did it with genuine compassion because I know what hunger feels like. I know what desperation feels like. And I used my new position to help people who needed it. Is that not what nobility should be? Using power to serve, rather than to elevate oneself. Lord Ashford was watching her with interest. You make a compelling argument, Your Grace. I'm not finished, Deanna said, surprising herself with her boldness. Lord McBride claims I'm unfit for this position because of my background. But I would argue that my background makes me more fit, not less. I understand the lives of common people because I lived that life. I can bridge the gap between nobility and the people we're supposed to serve because I've stood on both sides of that divide. That's not a weakness. That's a strength this kingdom desperately needs. She looked directly at Jordan, her fear transforming into righteous anger. You stand here claiming to protect the integrity of nobility. But what is nobility? Is it just bloodlines and ancient names? Or is it character, compassion, the willingness to serve others? Because if it's the latter, then I may be more noble than half the people in this room. The silence that followed was profound. Jordan's face had gone dark with fury. The council members were whispering among themselves. Vincent was staring at her with undisguised awe. Lord Ashford cleared his throat. The council will deliberate and deliver our ruling shortly. This session is adjourned. In the waiting room, Vincent pulled Deanna into his arms. That was incredible. You were incredible. I might have gone too far, Deanna said, her adrenaline wearing off and leaving her shaky. You told them the truth, powerfully and eloquently. Whatever they decide, you've won. 20 minutes later, they were called back. Lord Ashford's expression gave nothing away as he spoke. The King's Council has considered the arguments presented. Lord McBride's claim rests on the assumption that the Duchess lacked capacity to consent due to her background and education. However, the Duchess has demonstrated through her words and actions that she possesses both the intelligence and strength of character necessary for her position. More than that, she has shown qualities of compassion and genuine service that we would do well to see more of in our nobility. He paused, his eyes moving from Jordan to Deanna. The council finds no grounds to invalidate the marriage. The Duke and Duchess of Northridge remain legally wed. Furthermore, we commend Her Grace for her charitable work and encourage other nobles to follow her example. This matter is closed. The gavel came down with finality. Jordan's face was a mask of barely contained rage. Around them, the few observers in the gallery began whispering excitedly. They had won. Dina had faced her greatest test and prevailed not by pretending to be something she wasn't, but by fully embracing who she was. As they left the council chambers, Dina felt Vincent's hand tight in hers. They had survived this challenge, but she knew more would come. Jordan wouldn't give up easily. Other nobles would continue testing her. The battle for acceptance and respect would be ongoing, but she was ready for it now. She knew who she was, not a farmer's daughter pretending to be a duchess, but a duchess who happened to have been a farmer's daughter. Someone who could use her unique position to build bridges, to help people, to change what nobility meant. Outside, the sun was shining. A new chapter was beginning, not just for her, but for what she could make of her unexpected life. Chapter 10. Legacy of the Mountain Woman. 6 months had passed since the council hearing, and Northridge had transformed in ways no one could have anticipated. Deanna stood in what had once been an unused wing of the castle, now converted into a school. 20 young women, daughters of farmers, merchants, craftsmen, even a few servants sat at desks, learning to read and write under the guidance of 3 teachers Dina had personally hired. "Your Grace," one of the girls said, raising her hand hesitantly. "Is it true you couldn't read well before you became Duchess?" "It's true," Dina confirmed, moving between the desks. "I knew the basics, but nothing more. I've been learning alongside many of you, actually. Mrs. Brennan has been quite patient with me." "But you're a Duchess," another girl said, as if this were incompatible with not knowing something. "Being a Duchess doesn't mean I know everything. It just means I have resources to learn, resources I want to share with others who haven't had opportunities." Deanna smiled at the eager young faces. "You all have potential that shouldn't be wasted just because of where you were born." After the class, Dina met with Christopher in her private study, a room Vincent had set aside for her official work. The walls were covered with maps of the duchy, charts tracking the progress of various charitable initiatives, and letters from villagers she'd helped. "The northern villages are thriving," Christopher reported, reviewing his notes. "The harvest this year was successful, and the families you helped are back on their feet. Several have written to express their gratitude." "Good. What about the women's cooperative?" "Growing faster than we anticipated. The preserves and textiles they're producing are in high demand. Several noble houses have placed orders, actually. They like the quality, and apparently, it's become fashionable to support enterprises that help common women achieve independence." Dina smiled. "Fashionable. I'll take it, even if the reasoning isn't ideal. There's one more thing." Christopher's expression grew serious. "I've been hearing rumors from court about Lord McBride." "What kind of rumors?" "He's been unusually quiet since the hearing. Too quiet. I'm concerned he's planning something." Before Deanna could respond, Vincent entered, his face grim. "We need to talk. Jordan's made his move, but not the one we expected. He's not attacking you anymore. He's attacking the program itself." They gathered in Vincent's study, where he spread out several documents. "Jordan's filed complaints with the king, claiming that your charitable work is destabilizing the social order, that by educating common women and giving them independence, you're encouraging them to forget their place. He's gathered support from several traditional nobles who see your initiatives as dangerous precedents." Deanna felt a chill run through her. "They want to shut down the school? The cooperative? They want to shut down all of it," Vincent said. "And unfortunately they have enough influence to make trouble. The king has requested our presence at court next week to address these concerns." "So we're back to fighting," Deanna said quietly. "We never stopped," Christopher observed. "We just had a brief respite." The journey to the royal court took 2 days. Deanna spent the time preparing with Christopher and Vincent, but she felt different than she had before the council hearing. Less afraid, more certain of her purpose. The royal palace was even more magnificent than Northridge Castle, a sprawling complex of buildings, gardens, and courtyards that spoke of centuries of accumulated power and wealth. Servants in royal livery guided them to their quarters, and the next morning they were summoned to the throne room for a private audience with King Henry. The king was perhaps 50, with graying hair and sharp eyes that assessed Deanna with interest as they were announced. Lord McBride stood to one side, along with several other nobles Deanna recognized as his allies. "Your Majesties," Vincent said, bowing deeply. Deanna executed what she hoped was an acceptable curtsy. "Duke Vincent," the king said, "and this must be your famous Duchess. The one everyone's been talking about." "Your Majesty," Dina said, keeping her voice respectful but steady. "Lord McBride has brought some interesting concerns to my attention," the king continued. "He claims your charitable work is causing unrest, that common women are developing ideas above their station. What do you say to that?" Deanna felt Jordan's eyes on her, waiting for her to fail. But she had learned something in the past months. She didn't need to play by their rules. She just needed to tell the truth. "Your Majesty, I say that Lord McBride is afraid." The room went silent. Jordan's face flushed with anger. Even Vincent looked surprised by her directness. "Afraid?" the king repeated, his eyebrows rising. Yes, Your Majesty. He's afraid that if common people, especially women, have education and independence, they won't be as easy to control. They'll start asking questions about why they're poor while nobles are wealthy, why they have no voice while others make decisions that affect their lives. That's terrifying to people like Lord McBride, whose power depends on keeping others powerless. How dare you? Jordan began. I'm not finished, Dina interrupted, her voice cutting through his protest. Lord McBride claims I'm destabilizing the social order. But what kind of social order requires keeping people ignorant and dependent to survive? What kind of system is so fragile that it can't withstand women learning to read or supporting themselves? She turned to face the king directly. Your Majesty, I've seen what happens when people have no hope. I've lived it. When people are desperate and powerless, they don't become docile, they become dangerous. They revolt, they riot, they turn to crime because they have no other options. But give them education, opportunity, a path to improve their lives, and they become invested in the kingdom's stability. They become loyal because they have something to lose. That's revolutionary thinking, one of Jordan's allies said nervously. No, it's practical thinking, Deanna countered. I'm not suggesting we eliminate the nobility or redistribute all wealth. I'm suggesting we give common people enough opportunity that they don't feel crushed under the weight of a system designed to keep them down. That's not revolution, that's prevention of revolution. The king was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. Interesting. And you believe this from personal experience? I know it from personal experience, Your Majesty. I was that desperate person. I was the one everyone dismissed as worthless. If Vincent hadn't seen past my circumstances to my potential, I would have died in that mountain valley. Just another forgotten woman ground down by a world that saw no value in her. How many others like me are out there? How much potential is being wasted because we're too afraid to let people rise above the circumstances of their birth? She makes a compelling argument, the king said thoughtfully. She makes a dangerous argument, Jordan interjected. Your Majesty, if we start treating common people as if they're equal to nobility, where does it end? The entire foundation of our society is already crumbling, Deanna said quietly. You just don't see it yet. The villages I've visited, the people are starving, struggling, watching their children grow up with no future. How long do you think they'll accept that before they decide they have nothing left to lose? I'm offering them hope, which makes them less likely to revolt, not more. The king studied her for a long moment. You're quite unlike any duchess I've ever met. I'm unlike any duchess there's ever been, Your Majesty. I don't say that with pride or arrogance, just as fact. I bridge two worlds that rarely touch, and I'm trying to use that unique position to strengthen the kingdom, not weaken it. Your Majesty, Vincent spoke up. If I may, the villages where my wife has implemented her programs have seen decreased crime, increased productivity, and stronger loyalty to the crown. The women in her cooperative pay taxes on their earnings. The children in her school will grow up literate and capable of contributing more to the economy. This isn't just charity, it's investment in the kingdom's future. The king looked at Christopher. Lord Thornton, you've been quiet. What's your assessment? Your Majesty, I've watched the Duchess's work closely. Lord McBride is correct that she's changing the social order, but the change is beneficial. She's creating stability where there was desperation, hope where there was despair, and she's doing it more effectively than traditional nobility ever has, because she actually understands the people she's helping. The king rose from his throne and walked down the steps, approaching Deanna directly. She held her ground, meeting his eyes respectfully but without cowering. Duchess, he said quietly, you've caused quite an uproar in my kingdom. I apologize if I've caused trouble, Your Majesty. I didn't say I disapproved. A slight smile crossed the king's face. In fact, I'm inclined to support your initiatives, not because I'm a revolutionary, I'm not, but because you're right about one thing. A kingdom built entirely on keeping people down is a kingdom built on sand. It won't last. He turned to Jordan. Lord McBride, your complaints are noted but dismissed. The Duchess will continue her work. In fact, I'm authorizing her to expand it. I want similar programs established in 3 other duchies within the year. Jordan's face went from red to white. Your Majesty, I must protest. You may protest all you like, but the decision is made. The king's voice hardened. I've been watching you, Jordan. This isn't about protecting the kingdom. This is about your personal vendetta against the Duke and Duchess. It ends now. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Majesty, Jordan said through gritted teeth. Good. This audience is concluded. Outside the throne room, Dina felt her legs go weak with relief. Vincent caught her, his arm around her waist. You were magnificent, he whispered. Absolutely magnificent. I thought I was going to be sick the entire time. You hit it well. Vincent kissed her temple. You've won, Diana. Not just this battle, the whole war. The king's endorsement means Jordan can't touch you anymore. Your programs are protected. You're free to expand your work across the kingdom. We've won, Diana corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. That evening, at a formal dinner with the king and his courtiers, Dina found herself the center of attention. Nobles who had previously dismissed her now sought her out, asking questions about her programs, expressing interest in implementing similar initiatives in their own territories. Lady Constance approached with genuine warmth. Your Grace, I wanted to tell you I've started a small school in my own estate. Modeled after yours. It's only 5 students so far. But it's a beginning. That's wonderful, Dina said sincerely. If you need any resources or guidance, I'll absolutely take you up on that. Constance smiled. You've changed more than just yourself, you know. You've changed how we all think about what nobility means. Later, standing on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens, Dina reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. Less than a year ago, she had been the most despised woman in Thornhill Valley, carrying water buckets and enduring daily humiliation. Now she was influencing policy at the highest levels of the kingdom, changing lives across multiple duchies, and forcing nobility to reconsider centuries of tradition. What are you thinking about? Vincent asked, joining her. About water buckets, Dina said with a slight smile. About how much has changed. Any regrets? None. Except maybe that it took so long to get here. She leaned against him, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Vincent, what do you think would have happened if you hadn't come to Thornhill Valley, if we'd never met? I don't like to think about that, Vincent admitted. A world without you in it seems impossibly bleak. I would have survived, I always did, but I wouldn't have lived, not really. I would have existed, day to day, carrying those buckets, enduring the cruelty, never knowing there could be anything more. But there was more. There is more. And you're not just living it, you're creating it for others. Vincent turned her to face him. Do you remember what I said when I proposed? That I wanted a partner, not an ornament? I remember. You've exceeded every hope I had. You're not just my partner, you're my inspiration. You've shown me what it means to use power wisely, to lead with compassion, to never forget where you came from, even as you move forward. Dina felt tears prick her eyes. I love you. I don't think I've said that enough. You've shown it every day. That's more important than words. Vincent kissed her softly. Now, what's next for the famous Duchess of Northridge? You've conquered court, defeated your enemies, won the king's support. What's left? Everything, Diana said, her eyes bright with determination. There are villages I haven't visited yet, women who still don't know they have options, children who need education. So much work to do. Then we'll do it together, like we've done everything else. Epilogue. 5 years later, the old woman sat in the general store in Thornhill Valley, surrounded by younger women who hung on her every word. I remember when Dina Avila lived here, Peggy Wright was saying, her tone now one of pride rather than contempt. I always knew she was special. Always knew she'd do great things. The younger women nodded respectfully, not knowing that Peggy had been one of Deanna's cruelest tormentors. Memories were flexible things, and Peggy had thoroughly rewritten hers to put herself in a better light. Is it true the Duchess is opening a school here? One girl asked eagerly. Not just a school, a whole center for women's education and enterprise, Peggy confirmed. She hasn't forgotten her roots, that one. She's coming herself to oversee the opening next month. At Northridge Castle, Dina reviewed plans for the Thornhill Valley Women's Center with her staff. It would be her most ambitious project yet, not just a school, but a place where women could learn trades, start businesses, and gain independence. Are you sure about this? Vincent asked, watching her work. Going back to Thornhill Valley. facing all those people who treated you so poorly. I'm sure, Deanna said, because there are girls there right now living the life I lived, feeling worthless, hopeless, trapped, and I want them to see that there's a way out, that their circumstances don't define their future. If I can show them that, then facing a few uncomfortable memories is worth it. On her desk sat a letter from Sarah, the young widow Deanna had helped in the northern villages 5 years ago. Sarah was now running a successful preserving business, had remarried, and her children were thriving. She wrote to thank Deanna once again for believing in her when she couldn't believe in herself. It was one of hundreds of such letters Deanna had received over the years. Each one represented a life changed, a future made brighter, a person given hope when they had none. Mother sent word she'll attend the opening, Vincent said, referring to Deanna's mother, who now lived comfortably in an expanded cottage just outside the valley. Their relationship would never be warm, but it had evolved into something honest. Helen no longer pretended maternal affection, and Deanna no longer expected it. But they maintained respectful contact, and Helen, in her way, had become one of Deanna's most vocal supporters in the valley. That's good, Deanna said. She should see what's being built there, what her daughter became despite everything. Because of everything, Vincent corrected. Your struggles made you who you are, made you perfect for this work. Deanna set down her pen and walked to the window, looking out over the duchy that was now her home. 5 years ago, she had stood at a creek in Thornhill Valley, alone and desperate, certain her life would never amount to anything. Now she was changing the kingdom, one woman at a time, one village at a time, and the work was far from finished. Come to bed, Vincent said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. The plans will still be there tomorrow. Just a few more minutes. I want to finish this section. You always say that. And then hours pass. But Vincent's tone was affectionate, not critical. He had long since accepted that his wife's dedication to her work was part of what made her extraordinary. Later that night, lying beside Vincent in the darkness, Deanna thought about the girl she had been, the one who carried water buckets and believed she was worthless. She wished she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, that the mockery and cruelty would end, that someone would see her true value, that she would not only survive but thrive in ways she couldn't imagine. But perhaps that girl needed to walk that hard road to become the woman who could change a kingdom. Perhaps the suffering had a purpose, even if that purpose was only visible in hindsight. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness. For what? Vincent asked sleepily. For seeing me. For choosing me. For believing I was worth something when no one else did. Always, Vincent murmured, pulling her closer. Always and forever. And in the morning, when Deanna woke to another day of work, of challenges, of making the kingdom a little bit better than it had been the day before, she did so with gratitude for the improbable journey that had brought her here. From water carrier to duchess, from despised to respected, from powerless to powerful, but most importantly from surviving to truly living. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure other women got that same chance. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure other women got that same chance. So, my friends, as we close this chapter, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by people who couldn't see your worth? Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And if Deanna's journey moved you, leave that like button pressed. You already know it was worth it. Until the next story, remember your value isn't determined by those who can't see it.